What if I told you the greatest football legends you've never heard of played without face masks? What if the men who built the NFL names like Red Grange, Jim Thorpe, and Ernie Nevers died broke, forgotten, or broken by the very sport they made famous? This isn't your typical highlight reel. This is the real story behind the 1920s NFL. When leather helmets were the only protection and fame came with no fortune. From Sammy Baugh, the original gunslinger, to Bronko Nagurski, a man who could plow through defenses like a freight train. These are the titans who played both sides of the ball and never left the field. And yet, their names fade while the modern stars shine. It's time to remember. So if you're an NFL fan, a lover of vintage football, or someone who enjoys stories to fall asleep to, settle in, because this is NFL history like you've never heard before, told as a cozy bedtime story, but with raw American grit. Tonight, we remember those who shaped football long before it became a billion-dollar spectacle. We'll travel back to the 1920s and 30s, to the muddy fields, to the one-bar helmets, and to a time when players were heroes off the field and gladiators on it. You'll meet Jim Thorpe, the Olympic god turned NFL trailblazer. You'll hear about Joe Guyon, his Native American teammate, whose legacy was buried by history. We dive into Ernie Nevers, the man who once scored 40 points in a single game and walked away without a pension. There's Bronko Nagurski, football's original monster, and Red Grange, the galloping ghost who sold out stadiums coast to coast. You'll discover the brilliance of Dutch Clarke, the silence of Mel Hein, the courage of Fritz Pollard, the innovation of Kotal, and the strength of Clarke Hinkle. From Don Hutson, who invented modern receiving, to Otto Graham, the model for the modern quarterback. From Norm Van Brocklin, the rocket arm with 2 titles, to George Halas, the father of the league itself. These are not just bedtime stories. They are legacies, tragedies, and forgotten triumphs, all woven into the fabric of American football. So close your eyes, fall asleep, to the true story of the NFL's forgotten founders. Imagine it's the year 1925. The country is alive with the rhythm of change. The First World War is behind us, but its shadow still lingers. Flappers dance to jazz in smoky rooms. Silent films flicker in grand old theaters. The automobile is becoming a fixture in American life, and the streets are beginning to hum with ambition. But behind the glitz, the glamour, and the glow of this roaring new era, something raw, gritty, and almost gladiatorial is taking root. Football. Not the NFL you know today. No million-dollar salaries, no glossy halftime shows, no flashy endorsements. This was a different kind of football, a punishing, unforgiving brawl played by men with more brawn than backup. Men who played for one reason only: pride, passion, and sometimes just enough money to put food on the table. This is their story. The story of the early NFL legends. The ones who built the game with their bare hands and were left behind as it rose to glory. Many of them died broke, some forgotten, and others completely alone. Their names may be missing from highlight reels, but their sacrifices echo in every snap, every tackle, and every deafening cheer in today's stadiums. So let's go back to where it all started. In the early 1920s, professional football wasn't respectable. College football was the real show. It had the crowds, the press, and the pride. Tell someone back then you played pro ball. They might laugh or worse pity you. To many, it was a reckless, low-class pursuit, something desperate men did when there were no better options. Still, across the Midwest and Northeast, teams began to emerge. Canton, Akron, Rock Island, Dayton, Pottsville. These clubs weren't backed by billionaires. Most were funded by local businesses, car dealerships, meat markets, neighborhood bars, team owners, often butchers, salesmen, or barbers, and the players' steelworkers, miners, machinists, ordinary men with crooked noses and calloused hands who worked 40 hours a week and then suited up for battle every Sunday. There was no offense or a defense roster. You played everything. You kicked, you blocked, you tackled, you ran, and sometimes you never left the field. The gear primitive, leather helmets, no face masks, thin felt padding, barely worthy of the name, and uniforms that absorbed rain like a sponge, turning into heavy armor on muddy fields. Every game was a war. Every snap was survival, and the paycheck. Most players earned between $25 and $100 a game. It's about $400 to $1,500 today. But you only got paid if you played. If you got cut or injured, you got nothing. Many lived in boarding houses, shared rooms with teammates, scraped by just to chase a dream. Let's meet a few of these warriors. Ernie Nevers, a name barely whispered today. Once scored 40 points in a single game, a record that still stands. But when his cleats came off, he vanished. No brand deals, no coaching legacy, no broadcasting fame, just silence. Joe Guyon, a powerhouse halfback and one of the few Native Americans in the league, played alongside the legendary Jim Thorpe. He was fast, brutal, unstoppable. But when the game moved on, Joe became a janitor, sweeping school hallways, not coaching, not teaching, just cleaning. A man once cheered by thousands, now invisible, and Jim Thorpe, Olympic hero, gridiron legend, American icon. He died poor, forgotten. His family had to ask the public for help in his final years, because in those days, when football was done with you, you were done. No pensions, no insurance, no support. If you broke your leg, you were out. If years of concussions messed with your mind, you were dismissed as crazy. They didn't call it CTE back then. They just called you washed up. Bronko Nagurski, terrifying fullback of the 1930s, had to become a professional wrestler after football. Others became farmers, bartenders, or simply vanished into obscurity. Why? Because back then, glory didn't last. The crowds screamed your name until your knees buckled. The papers wrote stories until your bones broke. And then the game moved on. America moved on. This isn't a tale of pity. It's a tale of truth, of grit, of sacrifice. These weren't just early players. They were builders. Brick by brick, hit by hit, they gave everything and expected nothing. In this first chapter, we set the stage. You've now seen the world where the first NFL warriors fought. The mud, the metal cleats, the broken bones, the empty bank accounts. You've met the ghosts. But next, bring one legend into the light. Joe Guyon, a forgotten pioneer. A powerhouse erased from history. But not anymore. Stay with us, because their voices are still out there. Fading in yellowed newspapers, whispered in dusty locker rooms. Waiting to be heard again. Joe Guyon. Even if you're a hardcore football fan, chances are you've never heard the name. But in the early days of the NFL, he was a force, a trailblazer, a warrior. And like so many of his era, he vanished into the shadows of history. Let's rewind the clock. Born in 1892, Joe Guyon was a member of the Chippewa tribe. He grew up in a world that barely accepted Native Americans as equals, let alone celebrated them as athletic icons. But Joe didn't care about that. He didn't just break through barriers, he ran straight through them. He first gained fame playing college ball at the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. That's right, the same school that produced the legendary Jim Thorpe. Guyon and Thorpe were teammates. Imagine that. Two of the most powerful athletes of their time sharing the same backfield. While Thorpe got most of the headlines, those who watched them both swore Guyon was every bit as dangerous. He was big, fast, tough. He could throw, he could run, he could block. He was the kind of player who, today, would be worth millions. But this wasn't today. After college, Guyon joined the early professional leagues, what would eventually become the NFL. He played for teams like the Canton Bulldogs, the Ouring Indians, and the Rock Island Independents. That last team name probably made you do a double take. But the Ouring Indians, yes, that was real. An all-Native American team founded more as a marketing gimmick than a legitimate football operation. They performed halftime shows in full headdresses. They wrestled bears. They did trick shots with rifles. Then went back out and played football in the mud. Guyon wasn't just participating, he was dominating. In 1920, he helped lead the Canton Bulldogs to a championship. He was a star among stars. But the applause fades fast. There were no sponsorships, no retirement plans. Guyon played as long as his body would let him. And when the game moved on, it left him behind. After football, Joe took odd jobs. He coached a bit, worked as a lumberjack, Eventually, he ended up sweeping floors at a school, not as a coach, not even as a gym teacher, just a janitor. Let that sink in. A man who played alongside Jim Thorpe, a man who helped build the early NFL, ended up invisible, forgotten. Cleaning classrooms to survive, or no trading cards celebrating that part of his life, no highlight reels from the 1920s, no ESPN documentaries, but what Joe Guyon endured matters. He played in an era when Native Americans were still being sent to boarding schools designed to erase their culture. He wore his heritage with pride. He didn't just succeed in spite of who he was, he succeeded because of who he was. In 1966, the Pro Football Hall of Fame finally inducted Joe Guyon. But by then, he was long gone. He died in 1971. Quietly, no ticker tape parade, no emotional interviews. Just the silence that too often follows the forgotten. His story is not unique. It's one of many from a generation that gave everything to the game, and got almost nothing back. And yet that's what makes it powerful. Because these men weren't chasing fame. They were chasing something more elemental. Respect, purpose, maybe even belonging. Today, every time we cheer a touchdown, every time we see an athlete raise a trophy or sign a multi-million-dollar contract, we're witnessing the legacy of men like Joe Guyon. They didn't just play the game. They built it with broken fingers, bruised ribs, and silent courage. So the next time someone says legends never die, remember this. Sometimes they do, quietly in janitors' uniforms. Sweeping floors, schools that will never teach their names. But here we remember. Because this series isn't about nostalgia. It's about honor. And Joe Guyon deserves it. Jim Thorpe. Even the name sounds mythical. To some, he was the greatest athlete of the 20th century. To others, he was just a forgotten man. But the truth, his life was both. Let's begin where greatness often hides humble beginnings. Jim Thorpe was born in 1887 in what was then Indian Territory, today's Oklahoma. He was Sac in Fox Nation. A proud Native American at a time when America wasn't proud of that at all. Life was brutal. By the time he was a teenager, he'd lost both of his parents. Something inside him refused to give up. At the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, yes, the same place as Joe Guyon Thorpe found his calling, or maybe callings. Because he didn't just play one sport, he mastered them all. Track and field, baseball, basketball, football, wrestling, even ballroom dancing. And he didn't just compete, he dominated. In 1912, Jim Thorpe walked into the Stockholm Olympics and walked out a legend. He won gold in both the decathlon and pentathlon, events so grueling most men wouldn't survive one. The King of Sweden called him the greatest athlete in the world. The world agreed. But America? It had other plans. Soon after his Olympic triumph, it was revealed that Thorpe had once played semi-professional baseball. Not for fame, not for fortune, just to feed himself. But the Olympic Committee didn't care. They stripped him of his medals.
Ow.
Stripped him of his dignity.
Dow.
They didn't care that white athletes had done the same and faced no punishment. Jim Thorpe was different. He was native. And the system was never built for men like him to win. Thorpe didn't beg. He didn't rage. He moved on. He went pro in baseball. Played 6 seasons in the MLB. He wasn't a star, but he was solid. Then came football. Thorpe joined the early NFL before it was even called that. In fact, he helped found it. In 1920, when the league was known as the American Professional Football Association, Jim Thorpe was named its first president, not honorary, not symbolic. President. He also played, of course, running through defenses, kicking field goals, leading men. He was a warrior and a legend. But legends don't always get to choose how their stories end. By the late 1920s, Thorpe was aging. His money, poorly managed, dwindled. There were no agents, no retirement funds, no sponsorship deals. He worked as a security guard, a ditch digger, even took bit parts in Hollywood films, often playing Native Americans in stereotypical roles. Imagine that. The world's greatest athlete, reduced to a background actor in someone else's story. He battled alcoholism, poverty, humiliation. There were moments of dignity tributes, speaking engagements, but they were few, and they came too late. He died in 1953, broke, in a trailer park. And yet his story didn't end there. Supporters fought for decades to restore his Olympic titles. Finally, in 1982, 30 years after his death, the International Olympic Committee recognized Jim Thorpe as the sole winner of the 1912 decathlon and pentathlon. His name, once erased, was written again in gold. But here's the thing. That medal can't feed a hungry child. It can't rebuild lost years. Can't erase the silence he endured. Still, it means something. Because Jim Thorpe wasn't just a great athlete. He was a symbol of resilience, of strength, of what it means to rise when everything is built to keep you down. And here's what makes his fall even more heartbreaking. Today's athletes owe him everything. Every multi-million-dollar endorsement, at every players' union negotiation, every rights deal, every statue, every Hall of Fame plaque. Without Jim Thorpe, none of it happens. He didn't just play the game. He made the game and paid the price. Too often, we celebrate the victories and ignore the cost. Jim Thorpe paid in silence, in shame, in jobs he was overqualified for, in honors that came too late, in applause that echoed only after the curtain fell. But you're hearing his story now, and that's what matters. Because legends aren't just made of wins. They're forged in pain, loss, dignity, grit. Jim Thorpe had all of it. He ran for a nation that didn't want him, scored 4 crowds that barely saw him as human, shaped a league that let him vanish. And still, he smiled. He played. He gave everything. And while the world forgot for a while, we remember now. Jim Thorpe didn't die in vain. He died having lived a life no man before or since could ever replicate. He was the best. He always will be. Before the Super Bowl, before the dynasties, before the legends were legends, there was the Akron Pros. Ever heard of them? Didn't think so? But back in 1920, they were everything. They were the first champions of what would eventually become the National Football League. And yet today, most people don't even know they existed. So let's rewind. Let's go back to when football was raw, gritty, and barely holding itself together. The year was 1920. Pro football was still an experiment, a chaotic mix of semi-pro teams, traveling squads, and factory-sponsored clubs. Then came a meeting in Canton, Ohio, a dusty car dealership. For men, one idea: create a league, standardize the game, make it something real. Out of that meeting came the American Professional Football Association, what we now know as the NFL. Among the founding teams, the Akron Pros. Based in Akron, Ohio, a booming rubber town, this squad was assembled by Arthur Raney and Frank Need, and they weren't just owners, they were visionaries. They believed football could matter, could last. And to build a winning team, they needed more than just brawn. They needed brilliance. Enter Fritz Pollard. He was fast, he was electric, he was also black. In 1920, let that sink in. Fritz Pollard wasn't just the star halfback of the Akron Pros. He was the league's first black player, later its first black head coach. Decades before Jackie Robinson broke baseball's color line, Fritz Pollard was juking past defenders and breaking barriers no one dared to speak about. He played with elegance, ran with purpose, and lived with courage. And alongside him, quarterback Al Nacera, member of the famous Nesser brothers football clan. Big men, tough men, steelworkers who brought that same fire to the field. The 1920 Akron Pros were dominant. They didn't lose a single game. Their defense, impenetrable. They gave up just 7 points all season. That's right, 7. In an era where scoring was sloppy and rules were loose, that kind of discipline was unheard of. Week after week, they shut down opponents. Canton, Dayton, Cleveland, all fell to the Akron wall. They finished the season 8-3. And in a vote among league officials, the Akron Pros were crowned the first champions of professional football. No parade. No trophies. Just a mention in a dusty ledger. It's no big payday either. Just the satisfaction of knowing they were the best. But history doesn't always reward the best. After their 1920 triumph, the Pros faded fast. By 1926, they were gone. No banners. No reunion tours. No Hall of Fame display. Just gone. And Fritz Pollard. Despite changing the game, he was pushed to the margins. In 1926, The NFL quietly banned black players, and Pollard was forced out. For nearly 2 decades, the league stayed segregated. All while fans cheered from the stands, never knowing who helped build the game they loved. Pollard became a businessman, coach, a writer. He never stopped fighting for inclusion. But he never got back in, it was in T, until 2005, 75 years after the Akron. Pros disbanded that Fritz Pollard was finally inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, a lifetime too late. But what about the rest of the team? Names like Frank McCormick, Bob Nash, and Carl Kramer. All erased by time, no highlight reels, no trading cards, no million-dollar contracts, just stories, half remembered. A championship no one saw, a legacy nearly lost. And that's the tragedy. Because the Akron Pros didn't just win a title, they set the standard. They showed the world that pro football could work, that a team could dominate with defense, that black and white players could play side by side as teammates, as equals. They proved that leadership had no color. That greatness wasn't about where you came from, it was about what you left behind. But instead of being honored, they were buried beneath decades of newer, louder, shinier champions. But we're here to change that. Because if you love football, if you love the NFL, you owe something to the Akron Pros, to the Factory Town Warriors, to Fritz Pollard's defiant brilliance. To the 1920 season that started it all? No, they didn't have cameras, or packed stadiums or flashy uniforms, but they had grit, they had unity, and they had history in their hands, and they won. In a time when winning wasn't just about points, it was about possibility. So next time you hear about Super Bowl dynasties, MVPs, and GOAT debates, spare a moment for the first champions, the forgotten ones. The Akron Pros, their name may not be in headlines, but it's written in the foundation of the sport. They were there first, and that will never change. In the golden age of American football, one name echoed like thunder across muddy fields: Ernie Nevers. He was a titan before football had giants. A one-man army. A myth, carved in leather and bone. And yet today, most fans don't even recognize the name. No flashy documentaries, no statues in Times Square, no TikTok tributes. But make no mistake, Ernie Nevers was football. Let's wind it back to 1920s America. The Great War had ended. The Roaring Twenties were in full swing, and football, still trying to find its place in the American heart. College ruled the headlines, pro football, sideshow at best, but at Stanford University, a young fullback was changing the story. Ernest Alonzo Nevers, big, relentless, a blend of brains, brutality, and brilliance. They called him the Blonde Bear. He didn't just run through defenders, he bulldozed them. And not just on offense. He played defense too, and special teams. He even punted, kicked, coached, and sometimes called his own plays. In 1925, Nevers led Stanford to the Rose Bowl. Injured, both ankles sprained, he still played the full 60 minutes. That's who he was. Pain wasn't a barrier, it was fuel. After college, the NFL came calling. He joined the Duluth Eskimos, a team that traveled more than they practiced. Their schedule was brutal, 28 games, across 19 cities, in one season, and Nevers, he didn't miss a single snap, played every down, every position, every kick, every tackle. They called it the Iron Man season, and it was. But his real masterpiece came later. November 28, 1929, Thanksgiving Day, the Chicago Cardinals versus the Chicago Bears. A crosstown battle, and Ernie Nevers was the storm. In that single game, he scored all 40 points for the Cardinals. 6 touchdowns, 4 extra points. A record that still stands, nearly 100 years later. Let that sink in. All 40 points by one man. No one's come close. Not Tom Brady, not Jerry Rice, not Walter Payton, just Nevers. But he wasn't chasing stats. He was chasing victory, chasing purpose, and chasing respect for a league that few took seriously. Ernie Nevers made people believe pro football could be legitimate, that it could matter. But the grind took its toll. After a few grueling seasons, he stepped away. Then came World War II. Nevers answered the call again, this time not on the gridiron, but in uniform. A Marine Corps officer, a leader, a patriot. He didn't just fight for yards, he fought for his country. After the war, Nevers quietly moved into coaching. He passed on what he knew, shaped a few young men, and stepped into the shadows. He never demanded fame, never chased attention, but his legacy, etched deep into the game's DNA. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in its very first class, 1963, alongside legends like Jim Thorpe, Grange, and Bronko Nagurski. Because without Ernie Nevers, the NFL may never have survived those rugged early years. He gave the league toughness, he gave it pride, he gave it legitimacy. And yet in today's highlight-driven fantasy stats-obsessed world, his name rarely comes up. Why? Because Ernie Nevers played when football was black and white, before TV, before endorsements, before Super Bowl rings. But his greatness, it's timeless. Because real legends don't need Instagram reels, they need grit, they need moments, they need legacy. And Nevers had all three. He died in 1976, quietly, without the fanfare he deserved. No farewell tour, no jersey retirement streamed live. Just a silent passing of a forgotten titan. But here's the truth. Every time a fullback dives for one more yard, every time a player refuses to come off the field, every time football demands everything from a man, Ernie Nevers is there, in spirit, sweat, in sacrifice. So no, he doesn't trend. But he doesn't need to, because in the heart of football, where legends are made, not marketed, Ernie Nevers still stands tall. A name whispered by history, respected by those who know, and immortal to those who understand what it means. To give everything, every snap, every breath, every bone, to the game. That was Ernie Nevers, forgotten titan. Before beast mode, before truck sticks and stiff arms, before linebackers feared contact, there was Bronko Nagurski, a man built like a tank, with the speed of a train and the rage of a storm. The name alone sounded like a myth, but Bronko, he was as real as bruises. Born in 1908 in the iron country of International Falls, Minnesota, where winters are brutal and work is tougher. His parents were Ukrainian immigrants. They didn't give him toys, they gave him chores. By the time Bronko was a teen, he was plowing fields, chopping timber, carrying logs on his back. And that strength, that raw, unforgiving strength, would shape him into one of the most terrifying athletes the game has ever seen. He didn't find football. Football found him. Legend has it, a coach spotted him plowing a field with a horse-drawn plow on his shoulders and knew instantly. This wasn't just a boy. This was a force of nature. At the University of Minnesota, Bronko didn't just play football, destroyed expectations. Fullback, tackle, defensive line. It didn't matter. If there was a job to do, Bronko did it. Harder, faster, meaner. He earned All-American honors, twice. And in 1930, he entered the National Football League, the Wild West of sports at the time. His team, the Chicago Bears, and the league was never the same. Back then, football was rough. No face masks. Minimal padding, mud, blood, ice. Perfect conditions for a monster like Nagurski. He ran like a wrecking ball. Defenders bounced off his legs. He didn't juke, he charged. Crowds came just to see him hit. And oh, he hit hard. In one game, he broke 4 tackles, ran over to linebackers, and dragged a safety into the end zone. All in one play. Even legends like Red Grange called him the toughest man I've ever seen. But Bronko didn't stop at offense. Flipped sides and played defensive tackle too. Yep, he tackled just as hard as he ran. There were no breaks, no timeouts, no excuses. In 1932, he led the Bears to an NFL championship. And again, in 1933, his mere presence on the field made other teams rethink their strategies. Do we try to go around him, or just get out of the way? But Bronko wasn't done surprising the world. In 1937, at just 29, he retired from football, not to relax, but to become a professional wrestler. And guess what? He dominated there too. He won the World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship in 1939. Yes, really, Two worlds. Two brutal sports. One legend. During World War II, the Bears needed help. And in 1943, at age 35, Bronko returned to football. He wasn't the fastest anymore, but his hits still thundered, and the fans still roared. He helped the Bears win another NFL title that year. Then finally, he stepped away from the game. For good, he retired to a quiet life in Minnesota. No fame chasing, no spotlight, just a simple man who had done extraordinary things. But make no mistake, Bronko Nagurski was football's first real monster. Before Ray Lewis, before Marshawn Lynch, before Aaron Donald, there was Bronko. He made toughness cool. He made power poetic. And in 1963, he was part of the inaugural class of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, deserved more than anyone. Because Bronko didn't play a position, he played the entire game. Wasn't an athlete, he was an avalanche. And today, when fans talk about old school football, the hits, the grit, the pure violence of the sport, they're talking about the world Bronko created, yet his name rarely trends. Why? Because he didn't chase cameras. He didn't give sound bites. He gave bruises. But his legacy hits just as hard as his shoulder did. Every time a fullback lowers his head, every time a defensive lineman crashes through the line, every time someone says football used to be tougher, they're thinking of Bronko Nagurski. And when it comes to the toughest man to ever lace up cleats, Bronko's still in the conversation. So next time you watch a brutal tackle, or a running back bulldozes the goal line, remember the original, the man who did it first. It's the one who didn't just play football. He defined it. Bronko Nagurski is the original monster. The iron-hearted warrior of the gridiron. It's a name that deserves to be remembered. Forever. Before the Super Bowl. Before primetime games. Before football was America's obsession. There was Red Grange. He called him the Galloping Ghost. A nickname whispered in stadiums. A legend before the NFL was even respected. His real name? Harold Edward Grange. But no one used it, because when Red ran, he didn't just move. He floated. He danced. He vanished like a ghost through defenders. Born in 1903 in Forksville, Pennsylvania, Red lost his mother when he was 5. His family moved to Wheaton, Illinois, where his legend began. To support his family, he worked hard delivering ice blocks in the dead of winter. Each block weighed over 100 pounds. That built the legs. That built the engine. And by the time he hit high school, Red Grange was a blur on the football field. He scored 75 touchdowns in 3 seasons. But his story was just beginning. At the University of Illinois, Red became the face of college football, at the game that would make him a household name. October 18, 1924, Illinois versus Michigan. The crowd barely sat down when Red took the opening kickoff. 95 yards to the house. Then, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. For touchdowns in the first 12 minutes, 2 more before the day was done, that single game turned him into a myth. Newspapers raved. Fans swooned. They weren't watching a football player. They were witnessing magic. Grantland Rice, the famous sports writer, wrote, "A streak of fire, a breath of flame, eluding all who reach and clutch. A gray ghost thrown into the game that rival hands may never touch." That's how the Galloping Ghost was born. But Red didn't just dominate the field. He changed the business of football. In 1925, right after his final college game, Red signed with the Chicago Bears. It was unheard of. College stars didn't go pro. The NFL was considered second-rate. Some even called it disreputable. But Red's decision changed everything. His debut with the Bears, 73,000 people packed the Polo Grounds in New York. NFL crowds had never seen anything like it. Red Grange made the NFL relevant. He went on a barnstorming tour across America, 17 games in 67 days. Insane, yes. Lucrative. Absolutely. It brought in over $100,000 in 1920s money. Red split profits with Bears owner George Halas. He brought credibility, cash, and fans. He wasn't just a player. He was a phenomenon. Fame had a price. During a game in 1927, Red took a brutal hit, torn ligaments. His knee was never the same. He missed over a year. When he returned, he still had bursts of brilliance, but the blazing speed, It never fully came back. Still, he helped the Bears win the 1932 NFL championship, again in 1933. Even when he wasn't the fastest, he was always the smartest. He later transitioned to playing defense and even calling plays. Football IQ off the charts. But his impact went beyond the gridiron. Red Grange was the first football superstar. He starred in movies, signed endorsement deals, even had his own radio show. This was before NFL salaries meant riches. He built his brand from scratch. When he finally retired in 1934, he didn't disappear. He became a sports broadcaster, calling games and shaping how football was told to millions. But Red never let fame change him. In every interview, he stayed humble, grateful, grounded. He once said, "I never got a swelled head. I always felt I was just lucky," and maybe he was lucky to have the talent, lucky to have the moment. But football was lucky to have him, because without Red Grange, there might be no NFL as we know it. It's no million-dollar contracts, no sold-out stadiums, no Super Bowl Sunday. He brought the crowds, he brought the headlines, he made football a spectacle. In 1963, Red Grange became a charter member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Of course he did, because he wasn't just great, he was foundational. And though time has passed, and other legends have come and gone, there's still something unforgettable about the Galloping Ghost. The way he moved, the way he mesmerized, the way he turned football from a backyard sport into a national passion. He wasn't the biggest, he wasn't the strongest, but he was the spark. And every football play that makes your jaw drop, every crowd that rises in a roar, that's the echo of Red Grange. So next time you watch a game, and someone takes it 90 yards on pure speed, leaving defenders in the dust, remember who did it first. Red Grange. It's the Galloping Ghost, the man who made football famous. Before fantasy football, before touchdown dances, before quarterbacks became household names, there was a man who simply did it all. No flash, no ego, just quiet dominance. His name, Dutch Clarke. They called him the Flying Dutchman. But his real magic wasn't in the air. It was in the way he controlled every inch of the field. Born in 1910 in Colorado Springs, Earl Dutch Clarke was never supposed to be a football hero. He was small, he was quiet, but he was relentless. At Colorado College, Dutch became a phenomenon. He played quarterback and running back and kicker, and even defense. In 1928, he scored 103 points in just 8 games. That was unheard of. He earned All-American honors, and in Colorado, he was a legend before he ever went pro. But the path to the NFL wasn't smooth. In fact, Dutch missed his rookie season with the Portsmouth Spartans because he had a full-time job. As a basketball coach at his alma mater, football didn't pay much in the 1930s, so he had to choose. But in 1931, Dutch finally took the field, and from the moment he did, he changed everything. Dutch Clarke didn't just play quarterback. He redefined it. He called his own plays. He ran the offense. He ran the ball. He kicked field goals. He played safety on defense. He was the engine. And he was unstoppable. In 1932, Dutch led the Spartans to the NFL playoff game, the first of its kind. They played the Chicago Bears on a frozen indoor field at Chicago Stadium. The game changed the rules of football forever. Out of it came the modern NFL championship format. Dutch Clarke was right in the middle of history being made. In 1934, the Spartans moved to Detroit, becoming the Lions, and Dutch came with them. That season, Dutch Clarke led the NFL in scoring again. He was the team's quarterback, top rusher, top passer, kicker, and emotional leader. In 1935, the Lions went all the way. They faced the New York Giants in the NFL championship. It was Dutch Clarke who orchestrated it all. He didn't just play, he commanded. The Lions won their first ever title. Dutch was a champion. But he never celebrated with arrogance, never showboated, never demanded headlines. He let his plays speak. It shouted louder than anyone in the league. Back then, stats weren't tracked like today. There were no highlight reels, no instant replays. What if you were in the stands? If you saw Dutch glide past defenders, drop kicks from impossible angles, tackle with surgical precision, you never forgot it. Dutch Clarke was selected first-team All-Pro 6 times. He was the league's top scorer in 1932 and 1935, and from 1931 to 1938. He was considered the gold standard of what a football player could be. He was also one of the NFL's first player coaches. Imagine that. It's calling plays, leading huddles, managing game plans, then turning around and taking the snap. But Dutch never let power get to him. He stayed focused, disciplined, quietly excellent, and when it was time to walk away, he did so with grace. In 1939, he became head coach of the Cleveland Rams, and later, he coached back at Colorado College, where it all began. But his legacy was sealed. In 1963, Dutch Clarke was named a charter member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, one of the very first. That's how much he meant to the game. He played in an era of leather helmets, no face masks, no modern pads, no high salaries. But he played with heart, with precision, with a quiet fire that burned through every defense. Dutch Clarke wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, wasn't a self-promoter. But he was a dynasty builder, turned the Lions into champions. He gave Detroit its first real football identity. And though time has pushed his name into the shadows, every Lions fan, every student of football history knows the name Dutch Clarke. Because before Brady, before Montana, before Manning, there was a man who did everything, and did it all with dignity. He was the last true triple threat. A quarterback, a rusher, a kicker, a coach, a legend. And he did it all, silently. So the next time you hear about a mobile QB, who can do it all? Remember, Dutch Clarke did it first. Maybe, just maybe, did it best. Before spread offenses, before shotgun snaps, before the air raid and play-action fakes, there was the T formation. And the man who brought it to life, Sid Luckman. He wasn't just another quarterback. He was the architect of a revolution, a mind ahead of his time. In an era that didn't yet understand what was coming, Sid Luckman was born in 1916 in Brooklyn, New York, the son of a German-Jewish immigrant. Raised in a working-class neighborhood, Luckman's early life was far from the lights of NFL stadiums. But he had two things: brains and a rocket for an arm. At Columbia University, Sid ran a single-wing offense, a system built more for punting than passing. But even then, he stood out. Quick decision-making, tough as nails, a deep, accurate throw that could slice through defenses. Enter George Halas. The founder of the Chicago Bears saw what no one else did, that this kid from Columbia could change football. But Halas had a bigger plan. He was obsessed with a long-forgotten formation, the T formation. Like 3 backs lined up behind the quarterback in a straight line. A system designed for deception, balance, and lightning-fast passing. The problem? No quarterback had ever made it work at the pro level. Until Sid Luckman. In 1939, Halas drafted Luckman in the first round. But it wasn't to run an old playbook. It was to be the face of a revolution. Sid didn't resist. He studied. He learned. Broke down film, plays, angles. He became more than a quarterback. He became a football scientist. And in 1940, everything changed. The Bears played Washington in the NFL championship game. Sid Luckman led the offense with perfect rhythm. What happened next? The most lopsided championship in NFL history? 73-0? Yes, 73-0. Washington never saw it coming. The T formation destroyed them. Quick handoffs, fake reverses, wide open passes. Sid was orchestrating a masterclass. That game didn't just crown a champion. It changed football forever. Suddenly, the NFL realized this wasn't a fluke. This was the future. Sid Luckman would go on to win 4 NFL championships with the Bears. In 1940, 1941, 1943, and 1946. And during that run, he rewrote the record books. In 1943 alone, Luckman threw for 28 touchdowns in a 10-game season, in an era where most teams barely passed at all. His passer rating that year, a mind-blowing 107.5, something modern QBs struggle to achieve today. He did it with no gloves, no dome, no pass interference rules in his favor. He played in mud, in snow, against defenders who could hit high, low, and late. But Luckman never blinked. He was tough, he was smart, and he had ice in his veins. But maybe the most fascinating part of Sid Luckman's story? He did all of this while serving in the military. During World War II, Luckman joined the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. He split time between training, military duty, and returning on weekends to lead the Bears. Let that sink in. He wasn't just a football genius, he was a patriot. He didn't ask for special treatment. He just showed up, stout, and dominated, on and off the field. When he finally retired in 1950, Luckman had thrown for over 14,000 yards and 137 touchdowns. Those numbers might not pop today, but in his time, they were unthinkable. And even more than stats, he left behind a blueprint. Every modern quarterback, from Montana to Brady, from Manning to Mahomes, they all owe a debt to Sid Luckman. Why? Because he proved that the passing game could win championships. He showed the NFL that a quarterback could lead from the pocket, that a team could build an identity around aerial precision. In 1965, Sid was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He was more than deserving. He was a pioneer, a tactician, a champion. But for some reason, time has been unkind to his name. You don't see his jerseys flying off shelves. You don't hear his story on Super Bowl Sunday. But without Sid Luckman, there's no modern NFL. He's the bridge between rugby-style chaos and today's strategic brilliance. And while other quarterbacks chased fame, Luckman chased perfection. He didn't play for stats. He didn't play for glory. He played for the game, and he changed it forever. So the next time someone tells you Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time, tell them to go back to the grainy film, to the muddy fields, to a man wearing number 42, dropping back with calm eyes, reading the defense, launching a spiral into football history. That's Sid Luckman. It's the quiet genius who made the T formation come alive and gave birth to the football we know today. Long before football was fast, before it was sleek, technical, and explosive, it was raw, rugged, and rooted in the trenches. But in the shadows of that old school grit, one man saw the future. A man named Eddie Kotal. You probably haven't heard of him. He's not in the Hall of Fame. There's no statue, no Netflix documentary, no primetime highlights from his playing days. But what Eddie Kotal gave to football: speed, scouting, and a vision for athleticism that transformed the game. Let's rewind to the 1920s. Eddie Kotal was a standout athlete at Lawrence College in Wisconsin. Small school, big talent, played quarterback, halfback, and even defensive back. A triple threat. Smart, fast, fearless. He joined the Green Bay Packers in 1925. And for 5 seasons, he was a dynamic force. A two-way player in an era where versatility was survival. Kotal wasn't just another leather helmet warrior. He was thinking ahead. Always asking, how can this game be faster, smarter, better? After his playing days ended, Kotal turned to coaching. And this is where things got interesting. He coached at Central State Teachers College, now known as UW-Stevens Point. But his mind was already mapping out a different game. He started experimenting with formations, motion, and most importantly, speed in space. He wasn't just coaching backs to hit holes. He was teaching them how to outrun angles, how to turn open grass into an advantage. He was redefining what an athlete could do in football. But Eddie's biggest contribution came off the field. The 1940s, the Los Angeles Rams brought him on board, not just as a coach, but as the NFL's first true scout. Yes, before draft boards, before 40-yard dash times were national events. There was Eddie Kotal, clipboard in hand, driving across the country, scouring small colleges, looking for hidden gems. He didn't care if a school was in the spotlight, didn't care about fancy resumes. He wanted talent, raw speed, and coached brilliance. And guess what? He found it. In 1946, the Rams made a move that changed everything. They signed Kenny Washington and Woody Strode, 2 black players who integrated the modern NFL, a full year before Jackie Robinson broke baseball's color barrier, who helped push that decision. Eddie Kotal, he knew what these men could do. Not just socially, but on the field. He didn't see race. He saw ability. And that kind of football courage, that wasn't common back then. But Kotal wasn't done. He created one of the first systematic scouting programs in pro football. kept detailed evaluations, built athlete profiles, and helped pioneer the idea of a nationwide talent pipeline. You see today's massive NFL combine, it's hundreds of scouts and GMS running drills, breaking down film, chasing prospects. That's the house Eddie Kotal built, quietly, without recognition, without a camera following his every move. He changed the game with a pen and paper. In the 1950s, he continued to scout and consult, even worked closely with college programs across the Midwest. His fingerprints were everywhere on athletes, strategies, systems, but still, no headlines, no glory, just the work. And sadly, the end of his story, it's tragic. Eddie Kotal died in 1973, his name barely a footnote. No Hall of Fame nods. No bust in Canton. For decades, his contributions went unmentioned, forgotten in a sport that often favors flash over foundation. But here's the truth. Without Eddie Kotal, the modern NFL scouting machine doesn't exist. He was the first to ask questions like, how do we measure agility? How can a 5'9" athlete still be elite? Where are the undiscovered stars hiding? He turned talent into data, and data into dominance. Eddie Kotal gave football the gift of imagination. He saw what others ignored. Speed where others saw size. Skill where others saw simplicity. And possibility where others saw risk. He believed football could evolve, that it could become faster, smarter, more dynamic. And he didn't just dream it, he went out and found it. So while his name might never be shouted from the rooftops, know this. Every time a rookie surprises the league, every time a scout finds a gem at a Division II school, every time a team takes a chance on athleticism over pedigree, that's Eddie Kotal's legacy in motion. He was football's forgotten innovator, a man decades ahead of his time. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we finally remember him. Before face masks, before plastic helmets, before million-dollar contracts, there was a time when football was pure grit, no breaks, no substitutions, just pain, sweat, and legends. And among those legends, one name stood tall, Mel Hein. They called him Old Indestructible, and for good reason. For 15 straight seasons, Mel Hein played every single minute, on offense, on defense, and on special teams. In an era when players didn't come off the field, Mel Hein was the standard. Let's rewind to the early 1930s. The NFL was still finding its footing. Games were rough, fields were muddy, equipment was laughable by today's standards. Yet through it all, Mel Hein stood in the middle, unmoving, unyielding, unmatched. Born in 1909 in California, he played college ball at Washington State, where he quickly gained a reputation for being tougher than steel. Scouts described him as a smart, brutal center with linebacker instincts. In 1931, he joined the New York Giants, and it didn't take long before he became the heart of the team. He wasn't just snapping the ball. He was calling protections, making tackles, and leading by example. Played both ways. Center on offense, linebacker on defense, in a game that barely paused for breath. Today's players get rotated out every few plays. Hein, he never left the field. Imagine playing 60 full minutes every game for 15 seasons. That's more than 170 games without rest. And get this, he missed only one game in his entire career. One, not because of injury, not because of fatigue, because his train got stuck in a snowstorm. Now that's old school. But Mel Hein wasn't just durable, he was dominant. He was the anchor of a Giants team that won multiple titles. A defense that gave up points like they were made of gold. A line that bullied opposing teams out of stadiums. In 1938, he did the unthinkable. He became the first and only offensive lineman to win the NFL Most Valuable Player award. Think about that. The league dominated by quarterbacks and running backs. They gave the MVP to a center. Why? Because Mel Hein didn't just play football. He defined it. He was so good at his job, so irreplaceable on the field, that they had no choice but to recognize him. His football IQ was legendary. He diagnosed plays before the snap. He tackled like a freight train. On offense, he was the calm in the chaos, making sure his quarterback never hit the dirt. Teammates said he never got tired. Opponents said hitting him was like running into a wall. Coaches called him a machine in leather. But Eng wasn't flashy. He didn't talk trash, didn't seek the spotlight. He let his play do the talking. After retiring in 1945, he transitioned into coaching and athletic administration, serving as USC's head of officials for years, even coaching in the All-America Football Conference. And in 1963, he became part of history once again. Eng was part of the inaugural class inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, a fitting honor for a man who was football's first true Iron Man. But here's the thing. In today's fast-paced, highlight-driven world, people forget. They forget that before Tom Brady, before Jerry Rice, before the Super Bowl even existed, there were men like Mel Hein, holding the line, doing the dirty work, never missing a snap, and never asking for applause. The NFL we know today, the high-tech helmets, the substitutions, the coaching staffs, it all evolved from an era where men like Mel Hein gave everything, every ounce, every bone, every minute. So why does his name matter now? Because we can't truly appreciate the present unless we understand the past. Every time you see a center hold his ground, every time a linebacker makes a clutch tackle, every time a player fights through pain to finish the game, it's the ghost of Mel Hein still playing in the background. He was the first to prove that toughness isn't loud, that greatness doesn't always come with flash, and that a true leader leads with action. Mel Hein is a legend not just for what he did, but for how he did it, with silence, with strength, and with a kind of football soul that's nearly extinct today. So next time someone says the game is too rough, it's too exhausting, too demanding, tell them about the man who played 15 seasons without missing a minute. Tell them about Old and Destructible. Tell them about Mel Hein, because in the saga of football's toughest warriors, his name deserves to be carved into stone, not just remembered, respected. Before Patrick Mahomes, before Peyton Manning, before Tom Brady ever picked up a football, there was Sammy Baugh. They called him Slinging Sammy, the man who took the forward pass, turned it into a weapon. It's hard to imagine now. But in the 1930s, throwing the ball was considered reckless. Coaches avoided it. Fans didn't trust it. Quarterbacks weren't even trained for it. Then came Sammy Baugh, a skinny kid from Temple, Texas, with a cannon for an arm, and the swagger of a man who knew exactly what he was about to do. What he did changed football forever. Let's rewind. Baugh started at Texas Christian University, where he made waves by throwing the ball more accurately, farther, and faster than anyone had ever seen. Broke passing records at a time when teams barely passed at all. He didn't just complete throws. He threaded needles downfield, leaving defenders flat-footed and fans stunned. In 1937, the Washington Redskins made him their first-round pick, and from his very first game in the NFL, he made history. That year, he led the league in completions, took the Redskins to the NFL championship, and threw for a then-record 335 yards in the title game. It was unheard of. He was just a rookie, and already the best passer the league had ever seen. But Baugh wasn't done. Over the next 16 seasons, he redefined what a quarterback could be. His throws were tight spirals, launched with accuracy and timing no one else could match. While other teams ran the ball 40 times a game, Baugh was tossing deep bombs, quick slants, and pinpoint sideline passes. He didn't follow the rules. He rewrote them. But what made Sammy Baugh truly legendary? He wasn't just a quarterback. He was a punter. He was a defensive back. He was a lead at all three. In 1943, Baugh led the league in passing yards, punting average, and interceptions on defense. Yes, you heard that right. He threw touchdown passes, kicked bombs inside the 10, and picked off opposing QBs in the same season. That will never happen again. He wasn't just a football player. He was football itself. By the end of his career, he held almost every major passing record: touchdowns, completions, yards, passer rating, and the league took notice. Because of Baugh, teams started building offenses around the passing game. They realized the forward pass could control tempo, create excitement, and win championships. He made throwing cool, made it deadly, and he made it essential. But Baugh wasn't interested in stats. He was all about winning. He led the Redskins to 5 championship appearances and took home 2 titles. At a time when rosters were thin and players did everything. He was known for his calm demeanor, his surgical focus, and a southern drawl that masked the mind of a football genius. Opponents feared him. Teammates worshipped him. Fans adored him. After retiring in 1952, he quietly moved back to his ranch in Texas, content to let the game he helped build move on. But the game never forgot him. 1963, Sammy Baugh was part of the first ever Hall of Fame class, and to this day his name stands among the greatest who ever played. Think about this. If you enjoy watching quarterbacks today, if you love big passing plays, 2-minute drills, fourth quarter comebacks, thank Sammy Baugh, because without him, the quarterback position might still be a secondary role. Not the heart of every football team. He was the original gunslinger, the pioneer, the prototype. He proved that one man with one arm could tear apart a defense and carry a franchise on his back. He wasn't just ahead of his time, he invented the time. So next time you hear someone debate the greatest of all time, don't forget the man who started it all. Not with a catchphrase, not with a commercial deal, but with a football in his hand, a target 50 yards downfield, and the confidence to say, I can make that throw. He played when men wore leather helmets, when the game was brutal, when passing was a gamble, and he made it look easy. That's why Sammy Baugh isn't just a name in the record books. He's the blueprint. For every rocket-armed quarterback, for every fourth down miracle, for every deep pass that sends a crowd into a frenzy that's Baugh's legacy, he brought finesse to a violent game. He brought precision to chaos. He brought style to football. For that, he'll forever be remembered as the man who didn't just play quarterback. He defined it. Before billion-dollar TV deals, before Super Bowl halftime shows, before the NFL was America's favorite sport, there's George Halas, coach, owner, player, visionary. A man so tied to football's DNA you can't tell the story of the NFL without telling his. Born in 1895 in Chicago, Halas was the son of immigrants, a disciplined athlete, and a natural-born leader. He served in the Navy during World War I, then played baseball briefly, even appeared in a game with the New York Yankees. But his true passion was football. In 1920, Halas joined a meeting in an auto showroom in Canton, Ohio, where a group of rugged team owners decided to form the American Professional Football Association. They had no idea. They were creating what would become the NFL, and Halas, he was there from day one. He co-founded the Decatur Staleys, which he quickly moved to Chicago and renamed the Bears. From that moment on, he became more than just a participant. He became the league's architect. Let's put this into perspective. George Halas coached the Bears for 40 seasons. He won 318 games, 8 championships, and turned the Bears into one of the most dominant dynasties in early pro football. But coaching was just one part of the story. Halas was also the owner, the scout, the marketing director, and sometimes even the water boy. He did everything. He found talent like Red Grange, whose signing helped bring mainstream attention to the NFL in the 1920s. He embraced innovation, pushed for forward passes, formations, and better protection for quarterbacks. He even co-invented the T formation, a strategic revolution that helped redefine modern offense. Without Halas, the quarterback might not even be the centerpiece we know today. And it wasn't just tactics. Halas fought for revenue sharing, for equal competition, for league stability. When the NFL was struggling financially in the Great Depression, when teams were folding left and right, Halas was the man holding it together. He paid out of pocket. He covered costs. He promoted the sport tirelessly. Because for George Halas, this wasn't just a business. It was a mission. He believed pro football could be more than a sideshow. He believed it could stand beside baseball and boxing as a national pastime. He was right. In the 1940s and 1950s, Halas Bears were feared across the league. Physical, strategic, dominant. He coached legends like Bronko Nagurski, Sid Luckman, and Bill George. And through every decade, he adapted, he evolved, he kept winning. But Halas' influence wasn't limited to the Bears. He was on nearly every major NFL committee. Draft rules, broadcast policies, expansion plans, you name it, was present. He was in charge, and he was always building. By the 1960s, the NFL was booming. TV money was flowing. Stadiums were full. Fans were loyal. And behind the curtain, still guiding the vision, was George Halas. He retired from coaching in 1967, but remained the Bears owner until his death in 1983. When he passed, he had been with the NFL for over 60 years, longer than any player, any coach, any executive. He was the last original link to football's birth. To honor that legacy, the NFC Championship trophy is now named. It's a George Halas trophy, because without Halas, there's no league, there's no Bears, no Super Bowl, no Sunday ritual. He created the business model. He built the brand. He saw the future before anyone else did. And he did it with grit, with vision, with a relentless passion for the game. So when we talk about football pioneers, when we celebrate legends, when we mention names like Lombardi, Walsh, and Belichick, remember who came first. George Halas wasn't just a part of football history. He wrote it. He didn't inherit a dynasty. He built it brick by brick. From mud fields to national TV, from 1,000 fans to 100 million. From a dusty auto shop in Ohio to the biggest sport in America. That's his legacy. He was the NFL's first general, its chief architect, and its founding father. So the next time you watch a game, the next time you cheer for a touchdown, the next time you marvel at the precision of today's NFL, tip your cap to George Halas, because the road to every end zone starts with a man who believed that football could be everything. Long before the NFL was integrated, before end zone dances and instant replays, before civil rights marches echoed across America, there was Fritz Pollard, a man of vision, man of speed, and a man who refused to wait for permission. Born in 1894 in Chicago, Frederick Douglass Fritz Pollard grew up in a time when the color of your skin dictated where you could walk, where you could eat, and especially where you could play. But Fritz, he ran through every barrier. At just 5 feet 9 inches and 165 pounds, Pollard was small by football standards. But when he touched the ball, he was unstoppable. He starred at Brown University, becoming the first black player to play in the Rose Bowl in 1916. He dodged defenders and racism. With the same agility, spectators threw slurs, opponents threw cheap shots. Some teams even refused to take the field if he was playing. But Pollard, he'd never back down. His brilliance was undeniable, his toughness unmatched, and his presence revolutionary. In 1920, Fritz joined the newly formed American Professional Football Association, what would later become the NFL. He played for the Akron Pros and led them to an undefeated season and the first NFL championship. He wasn't just a star, he was the star. But that wasn't enough. In 1921, Fritz Pollard became the first black head coach in NFL history. Let that sink in. Decades before Jackie Robinson, decades before Martin Luther King Jr., Fritz was already breaking ground. He wasn't just calling plays, he was calling change. But the league wasn't ready. By 1926, Pollard and the handful of other black players were pushed out of the NFL, not because they couldn't compete, but because of racist pressure and an unspoken ban. The league went completely white for the next 13 years. But Fritz didn't disappear. He kept fighting. He started his own teams, barnstorming squads of black players that traveled across the country, playing anyone, anywhere. He ran through towns where hotels turned them away, where referees were biased, where fans hurled insults, and he still won. Pollard even created his own independent leagues, giving young black athletes a chance to play when no one else would. He became a trailblazer in business, running his own talent agency, a newspaper, and even producing films. Every door that's shut, he built a new one. Every no fueled his next yes, but history forgot him. For decades, his name faded. No highlight reels, no jerseys in stores, no statues. But the truth never faded. Without Fritz Pollard, there's no Doug Williams, no Tony Dungy, no Mike Tomlin, no Patrick Mahomes. He paved the way. First black player in the Rose Bowl, first black NFL star, first black head coach, and still, one of the most overlooked legends in American sports. But now, we remember. In 2005, Fritz Pollard was finally inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, a recognition that came nearly 70 years too late. But it came. And with it, a reminder that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear leather helmets. Sometimes they lead when no one's following. Sometimes they fight not just for yards, but for dignity. Fritz Pollard didn't just break records. He broke walls. And even when the league shut him out, he stayed in the game. He taught America that greatness has no color. Leadership is about courage, not permission. And that history remembers those who lead first. So, when we watch today's NFL, when we cheer for black quarterbacks, black coaches, black owners, we owe a moment of silence and a loud celebration. For Fritz, he didn't wait for the door to open, kicked it down and left it open for the rest. He wasn't just a pioneer. He was the first fire in a long fight for equity. The original game changer. The one who ran faster than hate could catch him. The one who coached before he was allowed to lead. It's the one who refused to be forgotten. And now we won't forget. Because Fritz Pollard's legacy isn't just in the record books. It's on every field. In every locker room, and in every black leader who's ever been told you don't belong, and proved they did. Fritz Pollard is the first black head coach in NFL history. A trailblazer, a champion. A name we'll never silence again. Long before the NFL was integrated, before end zone dances and instant replays, before civil rights marches echoed across America, there was Fritz Pollard, a man of vision, man of speed, and a man who refused to wait for permission. Born in 1894 in Chicago, Frederick Douglass Fritz Pollard grew up in a time when the color of your skin dictated where you could walk, where you could eat, and especially where you could play. But Fritz, he ran through every barrier. At just 5 feet 9 inches and 165 pounds, Pollard was small by football standards. But when he touched the ball, he was unstoppable. He starred at Brown University, becoming the first black player to play in the Rose Bowl in 1916. He dodged defenders and racism. With the same agility, spectators threw slurs, opponents threw cheap shots. Some teams even refused to take the field if he was playing. But Pollard, he'd never back down. His brilliance was undeniable, his toughness unmatched, and his presence revolutionary. In 1920, Fritz joined the newly formed American Professional Football Association, what would later become the NFL. He played for the Akron Pros and led them to an undefeated season and the first NFL championship. He wasn't just a star, he was the star. But that wasn't enough. In 1921, Fritz Pollard became the first black head coach in NFL history. Let that sink in. Decades before Jackie Robinson, decades before Martin Luther King Jr., Fritz was already breaking ground. He wasn't just calling plays, he was calling change. But the league wasn't ready. By 1926, Pollard and the handful of other black players were pushed out of the NFL, not because they couldn't compete, but because of racist pressure and an unspoken ban. The league went completely white for the next 13 years. But Fritz didn't disappear. He kept fighting. He started his own teams, barnstorming squads of black players that traveled across the country, playing anyone, anywhere. He ran through towns where hotels turned them away, where referees were biased, where fans hurled insults. And he still won. Long before the NFL was integrated, before end zone dances and instant replays, before civil rights marches echoed across America, there was Fritz Pollard, a man of vision, man of speed, and a man who refused to wait for permission. Born in 1894 in Chicago, Frederick Douglass Fritz Pollard grew up in a time when the color of your skin dictated where you could walk, where you could eat, and especially where you could play. But Fritz, he ran through every barrier. At just 5 feet 9 inches and 165 pounds, Pollard was small by football standards. But when he touched the ball, he was unstoppable. He starred at Brown University, becoming the first black player to play in the Rose Bowl in 1916. He dodged defenders and racism. With the same agility, spectators threw slurs, opponents threw cheap shots. Some teams even refused to take the field if he was playing. But Pollard, he'd never back down. His brilliance was undeniable, his toughness unmatched, and his presence revolutionary. In 1920, Fritz joined the newly formed American Professional Football Association, what would later become the NFL. He played for the Akron Pros and led them to an undefeated season and the first NFL championship. He wasn't just a star, he was the star. But that wasn't enough. In 1921, Fritz Pollard became the first black head coach in NFL history. Let that sink in. Decades before Jackie Robinson, decades before Martin Luther King Jr., Fritz was already breaking ground. He wasn't just calling plays, he was calling change. But the league wasn't ready. By 1926, Pollard and the handful of other black players were pushed out of the NFL, not because they couldn't compete, but because of racist pressure and an unspoken ban. The league went completely white for the next 13 years. But Fritz didn't disappear. He kept fighting. He started his own teams, barnstorming squads of black players that traveled across the country, playing anyone, anywhere. He ran through towns where hotels turned them away, where referees were biased, where fans hurled insults. And he still won. Before the era of specialists, before players tapped out after a single down, before the sidelines were crowded with backups, there was Clarke Hinkle, an Iron Man, a warhorse, a one-man army. He didn't just play football, he lived it. Born in 1909 in Toronto, Ohio, Clarke Hinkle wasn't blessed with freakish size or jaw-dropping speed. He stood 5 feet 11, weighed 202 pounds, and looked more like a factory worker than a football hero. But on the field, he was indestructible. He joined the Green Bay Packers in 1932. From day one, he was asked to do everything: run the ball, block the blitzer, intercept passes, punt, tackle, lead. He never asked for rest. He never needed it, because Clarke Hinkle played both ways, offense and defense, fullback and linebacker, in the mud, in the cold, and always in the thick of it. He was the heart of the Packers through the 1930s, an era when football was brutal, when helmets had no face masks, and pain was part of the uniform. Hinkle wasn't flashy. He was force. He'd charge into the line, dragging defenders like they were bags of laundry. Then, he'd stay on the field and hit back harder on defense. Once said, "I don't want them to gain another yard. You blitz all night?" Wait, that's from Remember the Titans. But it might as well have been Hinkle's motto, because he never quit. His rivalry with Bears legend Bronko Nagurski became legendary. 2 Titans. 2 wrecking balls on a collision course. And you know what? More than once, Hinkle won those battles. One play in 1934 stands out. Nagurski came charging full speed. Hinkle stood him up head-on and knocked him backward. In that moment, the league knew Clarke Hinkle was no second fiddle. He wasn't just a hitter, he was a thinker too. He read plays. He studied tendencies. He anticipated moves like a chess master. He led the Packers in rushing for 6 straight seasons. And when the team needed a clutch punt, a last-second field goal, or a tough goal line stand, they turned to Hinkle. He helped Green Bay win NFL championships in 1936 and 1939, pounding the ball when the air was too cold to throw. His coach, the great Curly Lambeau, called him the finest all-around player I ever coached. By the time he retired in 1941, he had rushed for over 3,800 yards, a massive number for the era. He also scored 35 touchdowns, made countless tackles, and left behind a legacy of toughness. But Hinkle's career was more than stats. It was about what he represented: durability, loyalty, relentless effort. When others got hurt, he played. When others hesitated, he hit. When others faded, he rose. He wasn't protected by rules. He was forged by violence and disciplined by repetition. And he never backed down from a challenge. Even during World War II, when players were leaving for service, Hinkle stayed connected to the game, mentoring younger athletes, building football's foundation for the future. In 1964, he was rightfully inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And today, few mention his name. Few remember the man who played every down, who gave every ounce, turned football into a personal war. But true students of the game, they know. They know Clarke Hinkle laid the groundwork for the tough as-nails fullbacks of the future, for the Ray Lewises, the Mike Alstotts, the guys who didn't just hit hard. They hit always. And even now, the Clarke Hinkle field at Lambeau stands as a quiet tribute to a man whose game never needed words, just action. So the next time someone tells you modern players are the toughest, tell them about Clarke Hinkle. Tell them about the fullback who never left the field, ran through you and then tackled you when you got the ball back, who refused to be defined by one position because he could play them all. Clarke Hinkle didn't want fame. He wanted the ball. and he earned every yard the hard way. He was the heart of the Giants dynasty during the 1930s and early 40s, a linchpin in their 1934 and 1938 NFL championship teams. He wasn't loud. He didn't trash talk. He just lined up, played hard, and made plays. Want proof? In 1938, at the age of 29, he won the NFL Most Valuable Player Award, the only offensive lineman in NFL history to do so. That's right, a center, named MVP of the entire league. That tells you everything about how dominant, how essential, and how respected he was. His coach, Steve Owen, once said, "Mel Hein is the greatest player I ever saw. He was never outplayed, never even matched. He wasn't just a blocker. He was a field general, a wall of muscle and intelligence. On defense, he read plays like a novel. He was always 2 steps ahead, always in the right place at the right time. He wasn't flashy, he was flawless. Game after game, season after season, N would go out, tape up, and put in 60 minutes of war. No relief, no complaints, no room for weakness. He never missed a snap, not due to injury, not due to illness, not even when his body begged for mercy. And he played in an era when you had to be a complete player. There were no specialists. You ran, tackled, blocked, and bled, all in the same drive. That's what Mel Hein did. And he did it better than anyone else. In fact, N was so reliable, the Giants didn't even carry a backup center for years. Why would they? Mel Hein never came off the field. When you think of toughness, you might think of Ray Lewis, Jack Lambert, Dick Butkus. But Mel Hein was the prototype. He didn't just hit, he absorbed punishment like armor and kept charging forward. He played until 1,945 15 years of punishment. And still, when he finally hung up his cleats, he walked away with respect, honor, and a reputation as football's Iron Man. After retiring, Ing stayed in the game. He became a respected coach and administrator, serving as supervisor of officials for the AFL and NFL. And in 1963, when the Pro Football Hall of Fame opened its doors, Mel Hein was one of the charter inductees. A first ballot, no debate, no hesitation, because legends don't need explanations. Today, most casual fans may not know his name. He wasn't a highlight reel player. There's no viral footage, no slow-motion spin moves. But for those who know the game, who respect the trenches, who value durability, intelligence, and sheer grit, Mel Hein stands alone. He is the standard by which all linemen are measured. So the next time someone tells you linemen don't matter, tell them about Mel Hein. Tell them about the man who never missed a snap, who played both ways with surgical precision, who redefined what it meant to be tough. Tell them about the Iron Center who never left the field. In a game where toughness is currency and consistency is a rare gem, one name echoes through the halls of early NFL greatness. Mel Hein, a center, a linebacker, a warrior. He didn't just play football, he became its spine. No flash, no flair, just raw reliability. Born in 1909 in Redding, California, Mel Hein was a quiet kid with a powerful work ethic. He grew into a strong, smart, and imposing figure. Standing 6'2", weighing 225 pounds, a giant by 1930 standards. But it wasn't just size that made Hein special. It was endurance. It was dedication. It was the fact that for 15 straight seasons, he never missed a single game. Let that sink in. In an era with no face masks, limited substitutions, and a rulebook soaked in violence, Mel Hein played every down, every week, every year. He signed with the New York Giants in 1931. And from the moment he stepped on the field, he became the anchor of the franchise. He played center on offense, snapping the ball, calling out protections, battling 250-pound monsters with his bare hands. Then he turned around, literally, and became a linebacker on defense. Not for a few snaps, not as a gimmick, but for the entire game. Week after week, year after year, Mel Hein became known as Old Indestructible, rightly so. In the violent world of early football, where blood, bruises, and broken bones were the price of glory, one man defied not just defenders, but the gear meant to protect him, Bill Hewitt, the helmetless wonder. Man who chose pain over protection and courage over convention. Born in 1909 in Bay City, Michigan, Bill Hewitt wasn't built like a giant, standing 5'9" and weighing just 190 pounds. He was undersized, even for his era. But what he lacked in size, he made up for with raw intensity. He attended the University of Michigan, where he made a name for himself as a fiery, relentless end. Not flashy, but frighteningly effective. In 1932, the Chicago Bears took a chance on him. And from the moment he stepped on the field, he brought chaos with every step.
Ow.
Bill Hewitt didn't just play football. He attacked it. Offense, defense, special teams. Every snap was a war, and he was the first into the fire. He played end on offense, catching passes from legends like Bronko Nagurski and Red Grange. But he was more than just a receiver. He was a vicious blocker, a thunderbolt off the line, and on defense, he was a nightmare. A pass rusher who used speed, leverage, and rage to tear through offensive lines like paper. But what made Hewitt truly unforgettable was what he refused to wear. A helmet. Yes, you heard that right. In one of the most brutal eras in football history, Bill Hewitt refused to put on a helmet. Why? He said it made him feel slow. He said he couldn't hear properly. He said he played better without it, so he ditched it. No face mask, no protection, just bare head and blind courage. And yet he thrived. Fans called him the helmetless wonder. And every time he charged into battle, they held their breath, watching this fearless warrior risk everything for every inch. His teammates, they called him tougher than nails. Coaches, they called him uncoachable, but unstoppable. He wasn't reckless, he was just wired differently. In 1933, Hewitt helped the Bears win the NFL championship, scoring the game-winning touchdown in the title game. No helmet, no fear, just pure instinct. And he kept going. Season after season, punishing defenses and absorbing punishment in return. He was selected to 5 All-Pro teams, dominated on both sides of the ball, and redefined what an end could do in the NFL. In 1937, he was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, where he continued to terrorize opponents and inspire awe among fans. But by 1939, the NFL had changed. A new rule came down. Helmets were now mandatory. Bill Hewitt didn't complain. He didn't protest. He just strapped it on and kept playing. But those who watched him say, he was never quite the same. The fire was still there. The hustle, the fury. But something about that helmet, it tamed him. It muffled the chaos that fueled him. In 1943, with World War II raging, Hewitt stepped away from football to serve his country. He returned in 1944 for one final season, but the magic was gone. He retired shortly after. But his story doesn't end there. Because Bill Hewitt's legend grew not just from how he played, but from how he lived. He was a man who rejected limits, who played with reckless abandon, who chose pain over compromise. And sadly, like many greats from the early game, his life ended too soon. In 1947, just 3 years after retiring, Bill Hewitt died in a tragic car accident at the age of 37, gone far too young, but not forgotten. In 1971, the Pro Football Hall of Fame came calling. Bill Hewitt was inducted posthumously, finally getting the recognition he had earned through sweat and sacrifice. He never played for fame, never chased records. He just played the game, his way. No apologies, no hesitation. And for a time, no helmet. So when we talk about pioneers, when we talk about legends, remember this. There was once a man who dove headfirst into football's golden age, without armor, without fear. A man who proved that greatness isn't always found in size or stats or safety, but in the willingness to risk it all. Bill Hewitt wasn't just a player. He was a symbol of grit, of rebellion, of raw, unfiltered football. Oh, so the next time someone asks who was the toughest to ever play the game, don't forget to tell them about the helmetless wonder. Before there were passing records, before there were Super Bowls, before the NFL was even a national obsession, there was Paddy Driscoll, a name once chanted by roaring crowds, now barely remembered, yet he was one of football's first true superstars. Born in 1895 in Chicago, Illinois, John Leo Paddy Driscoll grew up in a city where grit was a requirement, not a personality trait. At Northwestern University, and later at Great Lakes Naval Training Station, he showcased brilliance on the field. swift runner, a deadly passer, a pinpoint punter, and a clutch kicker. In an era when players played both ways, Driscoll wasn't just versatile, he was dominant. In 1919, he joined the Hammond Pros, but it was his move to the Chicago Cardinals in 1920, the NFL's inaugural season, that made him a legend. At 5 feet 10, 165 pounds, he didn't tower over anyone. But when he touched the ball, he was a magician. Quarterback? Check. Running back? Check. Punter? Check. Place kicker? Check. Defender? Absolutely. Driscoll was the kind of player who didn't leave the field because the game didn't exist without him. He could throw a 40-yard pass, return the kickoff, punt it 60 yards on the next drive, then line up a defensive back, pick off the quarterback he'd just outplayed. In 1923, Paddy Driscoll was unstoppable. He led the league in scoring, amassing 77 points in a time when games barely reached double digits. That year, he scored 27 points in a single game. Touchdowns, field goals, extra points. He was a one-man army. Driscoll's ability to place the football anywhere he wanted made him the most dangerous weapon in the league. He could win games with his legs, with his arm, with his foot, or with his mind. Defenses couldn't predict him. Teammates relied on him. Fans adored him. And his legend grew even more when he joined the Chicago Bears in 1926. That team was already star-studded red Grange. The Galloping Ghost had brought attention in crowds. But it was Paddy Driscoll, the older, tougher, and more experienced competitor who anchored the team. On the Bears, Driscoll wasn't just a player. He was the brain of the offense, the reliable scorer, the calming presence in chaos. Even when his speed began to fade, his brilliance never did. He became a player coach, then a full-time coach, teaching younger athletes what it meant to think, fight, and play like a champion. But here's the twist. Despite all this greatness, despite a decade of domination, Driscoll's name slowly faded from the headlines. Why? Because he played too early. In the era before film, before flashy media, before NFL stars were household names, he wasn't forgotten because he wasn't great. He was forgotten because his greatness was never broadcast. Yet his peers knew, and they never forgot. George Halas, founder of the Bears and NFL icon, called Driscoll one of the smartest, most valuable players to ever suit up. In fact, when the Pro Football Hall of Fame opened in 1963, Paddy Driscoll was among the very first 17 charter inductees, right beside names like Jim Thorpe and Red Grange. That's how important he was. He was a builder, a pioneer, a playmaker, when football was chaos and leather helmets. He laid the groundwork for the quarterbacks who came later, proved that one man could literally do everything on the field. Today, when we marvel at dual-threat quarterbacks, when we talk about players who dominate on offense and special teams, we're talking about things Paddy Driscoll did a century ago. He was the original Swiss Army knife, the blueprint, the inspiration, long before anyone knew they needed one. But here's what truly defined him. Effort. He never coasted. He never let up. Get every down, every yard, every second. He gave it everything. Whether it was a muddy field in November or a crowd of just a few hundred in freezing Chicago. Driscoll played like it was the championship game, because for him, it always was. Even after retiring, he never truly left the game. Coached the Bears in the 1950s, he stayed around the sport he helped define, quiet, humble. Content to watch others rise on the field he helped build, and when he passed in 1968, the game he gave everything to barely looked back. But we should, because legends like Paddy Driscoll shouldn't be whispers in history. They should be carved into the foundation of the sport itself. He didn't need a big frame. He didn't need TV cameras. He didn't need a highlight reel. He just needed a football and a chance. And with that, he became a champion, a pioneer, and a name worth remembering. So the next time someone says, "Who really shaped football?" tell them about the man who could pass like a quarterback, run like a tailback, kick like a specialist, and lead like a general. Tell them about Paddy Driscoll, the man who could do it all. Before there were dynasties, before there were billion-dollar stadiums, before the Super Bowl was even imagined, there was one man holding the blueprint to it all. George Halas, coach, player, visionary, and too many, the father of the NFL. Born in 1895 in Chicago, Halas was more than just a football man. He was an engineer, a Navy officer, a baseball player who once wore the New York Yankees uniform alongside Babe Ruth, but it was football raw. Violent, unrefined football that captured his soul, and it never let go. In 1920, George Halas represented the Decatur Staleys at a meeting in a Hupp Mobile Auto showroom in Canton, Ohio. That meeting gave birth to what we now call the National Football League. And George Halas? He didn't just attend. He shaped the league from day one. A year later, he moved the Staleys to Chicago. He became the Chicago Bears. And Halas, he became everything. Player, coach, owner, marketer, accountant, ticket seller. Did it all because nobody else could or would. On the field, Halas wasn't just standing on the sidelines. He played end, the original two-way position, caught passes, he blocked. He tackled, he strategized in real time. And in 1923, he returned a fumble 98 yards for a touchdown, a league record that stood for nearly 50 years. But it was off the field where Halas's true genius came alive. He saw what others didn't, that professional football could be more than a side act to college ball. It could be America's next great sport. So he went to work building the foundation. He brought in talent, like Red Grange, the Galloping Ghost in 1925. It was a marketing masterstroke. Grange drew crowds by the tens of thousands. The Bears became a traveling show. Pro football went national. Then Halas turned his attention to the playbook. He helped develop and popularize the T formation, which changed football forever. No more basic runs. No more chaos under center. The T formation meant precision, timing, power. It turned quarterbacks into field generals. And it turned the Bears into a juggernaut. Under Halas, the Bears became monsters of the Midway. Hard-hitting, disciplined, dominant. He coached the team for 40 seasons, amassing 318 career wins, a record that stood for decades. He won 6 NFL championships. In an era when rosters were tiny, travel was brutal, and strategy was still being invented. But Halas was more than just a winning coach. He was a steward of the game, pushed for league rules to evolve. He promoted radio broadcasts, then television, long before others saw the value. He understood that to grow the NFL, you had to make it accessible, and he understood loyalty. He stayed with one franchise's franchise for over 60 years. Through wars, recessions, league rivalries, ownership battles. While other owners chased profit, Halas chased greatness. He served in World War II twice. Each time he stepped away from coaching to serve his country. And each time he returned to pick up where he left off, building men, building teams, building legends. Legends like Sid Luckman, the quarterback who mastered the T formation. Bronko Nagurski, the unstoppable fullback. Dick Butkus, Mike Ditka, Gale Sayers icons, all shaped by Halas's philosophy. He wasn't always warm. He was tough, demanding, even feared. But he was respected. Players knew that under Halas mediocrity wasn't tolerated. You either gave your best or you sat. He turned football into a career, a craft, a calling. When he finally retired from coaching in 1967, he did so as the most accomplished figure the sport had ever known. And yet, he didn't walk away. He remained the Bears' owner and guiding force until his death in 1983. By then, NFL was a television powerhouse, a cultural phenomenon. The foundation George Halas laid in 1920 had become an empire, and still, he was humble. He once said, "Nobody who ever gave his best regretted it." That was his mantra. His coaching style, his life, he didn't seek fame. He built a legacy, quietly, relentlessly. That's why today, when you see the GSH initials on every Bears sleeve, it's a reminder that one man's vision, one man's obsession, one man's iron will helped build the game we love. George Halas wasn't just a founder. He was the heartbeat of professional football, a player who didn't quit, a coach who demanded greatness, a businessman who dreamed big, a patriot who stepped away when duty called, and returned when his team needed him most. So next time you watch a Sunday game with camera angles, million-dollar contracts, Super Bowl commercials, remember the man who worked in a shoe factory during the week, played ball on Sundays, and built the NFL in between. Remember George Halas, the player, the coach, the innovator, ete, the innovator, ete, and above all, the father of the NFL. Before legends had stats, before highlight reels and Heisman moments, there was one name whispered on every sideline: Bronko Nagurski. A man so strong, so unstoppable, so violent in motion, defenders said it hurt to hit him. It didn't matter if they hit him high, low, or all at once. He didn't go down. Born in 1908 in a small farming town in Ontario, Canada, Bronislaw Nagurski was raised on the fields of International Falls, Minnesota. He grew up splitting logs, plowing soil, and tossing hay bales. It made his hands like stone and his legs like tree trunks. By the time he hit college at the University of Minnesota, Nagurski wasn't just a player, he was a force of nature. At 6'2", 226 pounds, he was nearly 40 pounds heavier than most backs of his era. But what made him terrifying was his speed. He could sprint with the grace of a sprinter, then run straight through an entire line like a freight train. Legend has it, a coach once spotted him plowing a field with a horse-drawn plow. When the horse gave out, Nagurski pulled it himself. True or not, the myth fit the man, because when he ran the ball, it looked like he had a plow strapped to his chest. He joined the Chicago Bears in 1930, and football would never be the same. Nagurski wasn't just a fullback, he was also a defensive tackle. Yes, you heard that right. He played both ways and dominated on both sides of the ball. As a runner, he didn't juke, he didn't spin, he ran through you. There are stories, countless stories of defenders literally bouncing off him, of players lying on the ground gasping for air after trying to stop him. In one game against the Redskins, he was tackled by 4 defenders and still dragged them 10 yards into the end zone. They called him the man who couldn't be tackled. And when he wasn't flattening safeties, he was pancaking offensive linemen as a defensive tackle. He once broke a quarterback's collarbone on a blindside hit, with no penalty, because that's just how the game was back then. In 1932, he helped lead the Bears to an NFL championship. He was so dominant that the league literally changed its offensive style to find ways to stop Bronko. In 1933, he famously threw the game-winning touchdown pass in the first ever official NFL championship game. The Bears won 23-21. The play, a trick jump pass to Red Grange. Bronko faked the run, leapt into the air, and slung the ball for history. He was now a champion, a star, and soon a wrestling legend. Yes, after retiring in 1937, Nagurski turned to professional wrestling. Not the theatrical kind of today, but brutal bone-and-bone combat. And just like in football, he dominated. He won the World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship in 1939. He was strong, silent, and unstoppable, whether in cleats or boots. But World War II was raging, and the Bears needed bodies. So in 1943, at the age of 35, Bronko came out of retirement and returned to the gridiron. Most players would have been broken by then, but not Nagurski. He played 7 more games that season. And in the NFL championship game, he scored a touchdown that helped the Bears win it all again, one sports writer said. It was like watching a mountain decide to play football. Bronko finally retired for good in 1943, but the legend only grew. He returned to Minnesota, lived a quiet life, ran a gas station, refused the spotlight, no TV commercials, no radio interviews. He never chased fame. He said simply, "I never wanted to be a hero. I just wanted to hit people and win football games." And hit people he did. Years later, Hall of Famers would say, "Bronko was the toughest guy I ever saw. You didn't tackle him, you just held on and prayed." He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in its inaugural class of 1963, alongside legends like Jim Thorpe, Red Grange, and George Halas. But even among giants, Bronko stood taller. He was the prototype, the original power back. Before Jim Brown, before Earl Campbell, before Derrick Henry, he was Bronko. And he didn't just change the game, he redefined what a football player could be. Tough, fearless, unstoppable. So next time you hear about a power runner bulldozing defenders, remember the man who did it first, who did it better than anyone else. The man who couldn't be tackled, the man who left dents in locker room walls, the man who once tore a jersey in half with his bare hands because it was too tight, Bronko Nagurski, football's original titan, and one of the toughest players who ever lived. Before the West Coast offense, before shotgun snaps, bootlegs, and run-pass options, there was one man who danced through defenses with uncanny vision and called plays like a chess master in cleats, Dutch Clarke. They called him the Flying Dutchman. But make no mistake, he wasn't just flying. He was transforming the quarterback position before the position even had a true identity. Earl Dutch Clarke was born in 1906 in Colorado Springs. And by the time he suited up for Colorado College, he was already rewriting playbooks with every step. At just 5 feet 11 inches and 175 pounds, Dutch wasn't the biggest guy on the field, but he was the most electric. He could run, he could throw, he could kick, and he could defend. Yes, he played both ways, even called his own plays from under center. By 1928, Dutch was named an All-American and quickly caught the attention of the growing NFL. But back then, football didn't pay like it does today. When the Portsmouth Spartans offered him a contract, Dutch hesitated. Why? Because he was coaching basketball and football at Colorado College. Yes, this man was already multi-sport elite. But in 1931, he joined Portsmouth and immediately became the face of a new kind of quarterback. He wasn't just a passer. He wasn't just a runner. He was a general on the field, reading defenses, adjusting on the fly, and leading with precision. And most importantly, he was one of the first true masters of the T formation. The T formation was simple in design. 3 backs behind the quarterback in a straight line. What? But under Dutch Clarke, it became an orchestra of motion, deception, and power. He'd fake handoffs, sprint wide, toss sidearm passes, then stop on a dime and boot a dropkick from 40 yards out. Hit dropkick field goals, executed with elegance and ice-cold nerve. He led the Spartans to immediate success. But it was in 1932 that Dutch Clarke played one of the most pivotal roles in NFL history. That year, the NFL held its first official championship game, and it was Dutch's Spartans against George Halas' Chicago Bears. It was played indoors, on a shortened field inside Chicago Stadium because blizzards had made outdoor play impossible. It was muddy, it was loud. It was football history in the making. Dutch Clarke rushed, passed, kicked, and though the Spartans narrowly lost 9-0, his leadership that day pushed the NFL into a new era. Structured championships, primetime attention, and the beginning of modern football tactics. In 1934, the Spartans moved to Detroit and became the Lions. Clarke stayed on. He became not just the starting quarterback, but also the head coach. That's right, player, quarterback, head coach, all at once. He led the Lions to the 1935 NFL Championship, defeating the New York Giants 26-7. Dutch Clarke ran for a touchdown and kicked 2 extra points, cementing his place as one of the league's earliest true superstars. And get this, he led the NFL in scoring 3 times, scoring not just passing, because he did everything. He rushed, he passed, he kicked extra points, he returned kicks, he played defense, and he called every play. Dutch Clarke was one of the last of a dying breed, a complete football machine. He played in an era with no face masks, limited substitutions, and leather helmets that barely cushioned the blows. Yet he never fumbled under pressure. He never lost the respect of his teammates. Teammates said, when Dutch spoke, you listened. When he moved, you followed. After retiring in 1938, he turned full-time to coaching, leading the Lions, and later serving stints at the University of Detroit and as backfield coach for the Cleveland Rams. But the football world never forgot. In 1963, Dutch Clarke was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame's inaugural class, joining Bronko Nagurski, Red Grange, George Halas, and other immortals. And get this, he was the only quarterback named the NFL 1930s All-Decade Team, the one and only. Today, most fans don't remember his name, but they should. Because without Dutch Clarke, there may have never been a Johnny Unitas, a Joe Montana, a Patrick Mahomes. He laid the blueprint for a position still evolving, but forever shaped by one man who did it all first. He He was the pilot of the T formation, the flying quarterback of Leatherhead days, the coach, the kicker, the captain, all rolled into one. So next time someone tells you quarterbacks aren't what they used to be, tell them about Dutch Clarke, the man who called his own plays, kicked his own points, won his own championships, and flew past every limit football ever knew. Dutch Clarke, the flying T-formation quarterback of the 1930s, and one of the greatest to ever take the field. When you watch a quarterback drop back, scan the field, hit a receiver on a deep post with perfect timing, you're watching the legacy of one man. Not Brady, not Montana, not even Unitas. Sid Gillman. He wasn't just a coach. He was a revolution. A strategist with a chalkboard who saw the future of football before anyone else. Born in 1911 in Minneapolis, Sid Gillman grew up with a deep appreciation for structure, timing, and perfection. Not surprisingly, he earned a degree in education, and soon after, began applying that knowledge to the game of football. But what made Gillman different? Simple. He believed the forward pass wasn't just a tool, it was the future. In an era when coaches ran the ball 40 times a game, Gillman was sketching passing trees, mapping route combinations, and studying game film like a scientist. That S. Wright Gillman was one of the first coaches to use film study as a core part of his game prep. He didn't just watch replays, he analyzed them, frame by frame, seeking patterns, weaknesses, and tendencies. By the late 1940s, Gillman was an assistant at Ohio State, then head coach at Miami University in Ohio, where he posted a 3-1-6-1 record over 4 seasons. But his real impact came in the pro ranks. In 1955, he became head coach of the Los Angeles Rams, bringing his pass-heavy philosophy to a league still dominated by ground and pound. His Rams set offensive records, but it wasn't just yardage, it was how they attacked defenses. Gillman didn't throw just to throw. He stretched the field vertically, opening up space with deep threats, then slicing defenses with short routes underneath. Sound familiar? That's because his blueprint would become the foundation for the West Coast offense, the air choreo system, and even today's spread offenses. But Gillman's true masterpiece came when he took over the Los Angeles Chargers in 1960, charter franchise in the newly formed AFL. He moved the team to San Diego the next year and built an offense that became the gold standard. Quarterback John Haddle, tight end Dave Kokorik, most importantly Lance Alworth, one of the first truly elite deep threat wide receivers. Gillman's philosophy was simple: throw deep early, stretch the field, and make the defense play honest. He was obsessed with timing routes. Each receiver's step was synchronized to the quarterback's drop. If the play took 3.1 seconds to develop, then the ball was out in 3.1 seconds no later, no sooner. And this wasn't a gimmick. It worked. In 1963, the Chargers dominated the AFL, scoring 51 points in the AFL Championship game against the Boston Patriots. It remains one of the most lopsided title wins in pro football history. Gillman's offense was explosive, efficient, and innovative. But his genius didn't stop with passing plays. He was one of the first coaches to use pre-snap motion, shifting backs and tight ends to confuse defenses. He introduced option routes, giving receivers the freedom to adjust based on coverage, and he constantly evolved, adjusting formations and protections to suit his personnel. But here's what made Sid Gillman truly special: his coaching tree. Dozens of future legends either coached under him, played for him, or studied his methods. Al Davis, Chuck Noll, Don Coryell, Bill Walsh. That's right, Bill Walsh, the architect of the West Coast offense, once called Gillman the Einstein of football. Because without Gillman's emphasis on precision, film, and vertical threat, the short passing game would never have had space to work. Gillman wasn't just changing schemes, he was changing mindsets. He made teams fear the deep ball. He made defenses cover every inch of grass. He made football a game of timing, spacing, and intelligence. And he did it decades before anyone else caught up. By the time he retired in the late 1970s, Gillman had compiled 123 career wins, one AFL title, and the respect of every great offensive mind that followed. In 1983, he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, not just as a coach, but as a pioneer. Today, when you watch a perfectly run go route, or a quarterback audibling into a wheel route, or a coordinator dissecting coverage with 4K drone footage. You're watching Sid Gillman's DNA in action. He didn't invent the forward pass, but he elevated it. He refined it. He built the modern passing game on paper and brought it to life on the field. So next time you hear someone say, "Football is all about passing these days," just smile and remember the man who saw it all coming. Sid Gillman, father of the modern passing game, and the coach who made the future arrive early. They called him the Dutchman, quarterback with a cannon for an arm, a fierce competitive fire, and a brain that dissected defenses like a surgeon. Norm Van Brocklin wasn't just a strong passer, he was a two-time NFL champion, fearless field general, and the man who still holds the NFL record for most passing yards in a single game. Yeah, that record stood since 1951. Let's rewind. Born in 1926 in South Dakota, Van Brocklin's journey to greatness began after serving in the U.S. Navy during World War II. Post-war, he enrolled at the University of Oregon, where he quickly gained a reputation for his deep throws and cool demeanor. By 1949, he entered the NFL draft and landed with the Los Angeles Rams, a team that already had an established quarterback, Bob Waterfield. But instead of riding the bench, Van Brocklin did something no one expected. He forced a Tucker-Dack system to work. The Rams rotated Waterfield and Van Brocklin, each taking turns carving up defenses. It sounds impossible today, but it worked. In 1951, it led to a championship. That year, the Rams were electric, a vertical offense built for speed, timing, and big plays. Led by receivers like Tom Fears and Elroy Kraslick's Hirsch, and orchestrated by Van Brocklin's monster right arm, the Rams stormed through the league. And in Week 1 of that 1951 season, Van Brocklin put his name in the record books forever. 554 passing yards in a single game against the New York Yanks. That number still hasn't been topped. Not by Brady, not by Breeze, not by Mahomes. But Van Brocklin wasn't just about stats. He was about winning. After the Rams' 1951 title, he played several more seasons in LA, but eventually grew tired of the QB rotation and wanted his own team. In 1958, he got it, traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, a franchise desperate for a spark. And that's when the Dutchman delivered one of the greatest swan songs in football history. In 1960, at age 34, Van Brocklin led the Eagles to a 10-2 record, threw for over 2,400 yards, and guided them into the NFL championship game against Vince Lombardi's Green Bay Packers. No one gave Philly a chance. Lombardi's Packers were young, explosive, and physical. But Van Brocklin, he was crafty, he was calm, he was clutch. The game came down to the wire, and in the final moments, with the Eagles clinging to a lead, they stopped the Packers at the goal line. Eagles won 17-13. It was Lombardi's only playoff loss. Van Brocklin was named NFL MVP. He retired right after that game, going out on top, the championship and an MVP under his belt. But Van Brocklin wasn't done with football. He transitioned to coaching, taking the reins of the expansion Minnesota Vikings in 1961. His time as a head coach was rocky, filled with flashes of brilliance and plenty of frustration. He famously clashed with rookie quarterback Fran Tarkenton, preferring traditional pocket passing over Tarkenton's scrambling style. Eventually he left coaching, but his on-field legacy was already cemented. Van Brocklin wasn't the flashiest quarterback. He didn't dance, scramble, or toss underhand flips. He stood tall in the pocket, surveyed the field, and let it fly. He was a pure passer, one of the first quarterbacks to command the game entirely from under center. A coach on the field who could read blitzes, shift protections, and find the open man deep. And let's talk about that arm. Players and coaches who watched him throw say the ball exploded out of his hand. He didn't just throw deep. He threw lasers 60 yards downfield with precision. That 554-yard game in 1951, it wasn't a shootout. It wasn't overtime. He did it in regulation. In an era when teams ran the ball 40 times a game. Think about that. And yet, despite all the records and 2 championships, Van Brocklin is often left out of the GOAT conversations. Why? Maybe it's the era. Maybe it's the style. Maybe it's just that his name doesn't sound like highlight reels and viral plays. But make no mistake, Norm Van Brocklin was one of the most important quarterbacks in NFL history. He bridged the gap between leather helmets and modern passing attacks, proved you could win with your arm. He played fearlessly, spoke his mind, and never backed down from a challenge. In 1971, he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, a fitting honor for a man whose records still echo through time. The next time you see a quarterback drop back, launch a 50-yard bomb and turn the tide of a game with one throw. Remember the man who did it first. The Dutchman, the record holder, the champion. Norm Van Brocklin, he came, he passed, conquered, and then walked away. With 2 NFL titles and a legacy carved in deep spirals. Before Brady, before Montana, before the NFL was even called the NFL, there was Jim Thorpe, an athlete so gifted, so versatile that calling him a football player doesn't even begin to tell the story. Olympian, baseball star, football legend, a man who did it all, and often all at once. Jim Thorpe wasn't just one of the first football stars. He was the first athletic superhero. And maybe, just maybe, still the greatest all-around athlete America has ever seen.
Let's rewind.
Jim Thorpe was born in 1887 in Indian Territory, what is now Oklahoma. He was a Native American of Sac and Fox descent, and from the start, life was hard. But that hardship built something unbreakable: strength, speed, and willpower. Thorpe enrolled at the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania, where he first made waves under the coaching of Glenn Pop Warner, and by waves we mean tsunamis. He played halfback, defensive back, kicker, and punter, and dominated all of them. In 1911 and 1912, Thorpe led Carlisle to wins over top college teams, and in 1912, he was named All-American. But it was what he did off the gridiron that shocked the world. That same year, Thorpe traveled to Stockholm, Sweden to compete in the 1912 Olympics. He entered the decathlon and pentathlon, 2 of the most grueling athletic contests ever created, and he won both, by huge margins. In fact, King Gustav V of Sweden greeted Thorpe after the decathlon with these words: "Sir, you are the greatest athlete in the world." Thorpe replied, "Thanks, King." But soon after that triumph, scandal hit. It was revealed that Thorpe had been paid small amounts to play minor league baseball, which violated the Olympic rules of amateurism at the time. Despite the fact that many athletes did the same, Thorpe's medals were stripped. He lost his titles, his glory, his place in Olympic history, but not his greatness. Thorpe returned to the U.S. and turned fully to professional sports. He played 6 seasons of Major League Baseball, mostly with the New York Giants, but where he really made his mark was in football. He became the face of early professional football, playing for teams like the Canton Bulldogs and dominating both sides of the ball. There were no helmets, no pads, no glory. But Thorpe, he ran over you. Around you, or right through you. He kicked field goals, punted, he returned punts and kickoffs. He passed, he tackled, scored, he did everything. In 1920, Thorpe became the first president of the American Professional Football Association, which would later become the National Football League. Think about that. The first president of the NFL was also the league's best player. You want resume bullet points? Try these on for size. Led Canton to 3 unofficial championships in the 1910s. Drew thousands of fans just by being on the field. Played until he was nearly 40 years old. Competed at a high level in football, baseball, basketball, and track. Made Native Americans proud when few people in power even gave them a voice. Thorpe was the name in early football. He was physical. He was fast. He was agile. He was brilliant. He was in every sense of the word, a Superman. But his later years were hard. After retiring, he struggled financially. He bounced between odd jobs, working as a security guard, construction worker, even appearing in movies. He faced discrimination, isolation, and obscurity, and yet his legend never faded. In 1950, the Associated Press named him the greatest athlete of the first half of the 20th century. In 1963, he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame part of the inaugural class. And in 1983, the U.S. Postal Service issued a stamp in his honor. But justice drew justice came later. In 2022, over a century after he dominated the Olympics, the International Olympic Committee officially reinstated Thorpe as the sole winner of both the decathlon and pentathlon at the 1912 Games. He got his medals back, his legacy restored, his rightful place cemented. Jim Thorpe wasn't just a football player. He was football itself in its rawest form, tough, unyielding, relentless. And more than that, he was a symbol of strength, balance, of perseverance, of how sports can transcend borders, race, and hardship. So when people ask, who was the first great football player, or who was the most complete athlete ever, there's only one name that stands above the rest: Jim Thorpe. He ran faster, jumped higher, hit harder, and shined brighter than anyone in his time. And maybe, just maybe, anyone since. A warrior on the field, a pioneer off it, and the original Gridiron Superman. Before Mahomes, before Brady, before Montana, there was Otto Graham, a name not often shouted in today's quarterback debates, but a man who quietly, completely, and utterly redefined what it meant to command an offense. He didn't talk much, didn't showboat, didn't need to, because all Otto Graham did was win. He wasn't just ahead of his time, he set the time. He was the prototype, the mold from which the modern quarterback was cast. Let's roll back to where it all began. Born in 1911 in Waukegan, Illinois, Graham was a gifted athlete, fast, intelligent, and coachable. He excelled in multiple sports: basketball, baseball, and football. In fact, he almost wasn't a football player. He attended Northwestern University on a basketball scholarship. But when the football coaches saw him throw, it was game over. By 1941, Otto Graham was under center for Northwestern. And in 1943, he was All-American. And came World War II, and Otto served his country in the U.S. Coast Guard, where he still played football, this time under the great Paul Brown, a pairing that would change football history. Because when the war ended and the All-America Football Conference was born, Paul Brown took the helm of the Cleveland Browns, and he wanted Otto Graham as his quarterback. And that's when everything changed. Graham joined the Browns in 1946, and for the next 10 years, he did something no quarterback has done since. He led his team to the championship game every single season of his career. Let that sink in. 10 seasons, 10 championship games. That's not a typo. That's dominance. And he wasn't just riding a great team. He was the engine. He had a cannon for an arm, a surgeon's precision, and a calm, calculated mind that read defenses like a chess grandmaster. He could call audibles, change protections, lead 2-minute drills like it was 2025. All in the 1940s. Graham's Browns won 7 championships. 4 in the AAFC, 3 in the NFL. When the AAFC merged with the NFL in 1950, people wondered, could Otto's magic continue against NFL competition? Spoiler, it did. That very season in 1950, Graham led the Browns to the NFL title. He proved his style translated. He wasn't a fluke. He wasn't a system guy. He was the real deal. In 1953, he led the league in passing yards. In 1955, he threw 4 touchdowns in the NFL title game. Then, he retired. No farewell tour, no fanfare. Just a clean, quiet exit. 10 seasons, 10 title games, 7 championships. A resume so absurd it almost doesn't feel real. Otto Graham didn't scramble much. He didn't wow you with flash. But he changed the game with efficiency and excellence. He was the first to truly own the position, like a modern field general. Quick reads, precision throws, disciplined execution. Sound familiar? Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Joe Montana, they all owe something to number 60 in Cleveland. And the stats? Well, how about this? Career win percentage of 81%, still one of the highest in football history. Over 23,000 passing yards and 174 touchdowns in an era where throwing the ball was risky. NFL MVP in 1951, 1953, and March 1955 time A-LAN-FL, and Hall of Fame inductee in 1965. And remember, this was all done in a brutal era, with minimal protection, leather helmets. and defensive backs who were allowed to mug receivers. Otto Graham thrived anyway. Even Paul Brown once said, Otto was the key to everything. Built a team around him. That's how central Graham was. Wasn't a plug-and-play guy. He was the architect, the man who made the first passing offense truly dangerous. After retirement, he coached. He even served as athletic director for the Coast Guard Academy. Always humble. Always about the game, never about himself. And yet Otto Graham is often forgotten in the mainstream quarterback conversation. Maybe it's the black and white footage. Maybe it's the modest persona. Maybe it's because he played in an era that's harder to relate to. But greatness doesn't expire. And when you judge a quarterback by wins, accuracy, vision, and leadership, realize Otto Graham was doing it all before anyone else. He was the standard before there was one. The blueprint, the prototype. He laid the path others would follow, and he did it with class, excellence, and consistency. So next time someone asks you who really invented the quarterback position as we know it, don't forget the man who wore number 60, the man who led 10 straight championship runs, the man who threw the ball like it was 2024 in 1946, Otto Graham. The original prototype for the modern quarterback. And maybe most quietly dominant winner in NFL history. Every era has a game changer. Someone who doesn't just play the game. They reinvent it. In the 1940s, that man was Sid Luckman, a quarterback, sure. But more than that, he was the brain behind a revolution. Player who helped drag football out of the single-wing shadows and into a future dominated by passing, timing, and strategy. He didn't invent the T formation, but he's the reason it worked. Let's rewind. Sidney Luckman was born in 1916 in Brooklyn, New York, the son of Jewish immigrants. Smart, athletic kid with a strong arm. He played football in high school and quickly stood out. He wasn't just throwing deep. He was reading defenses, calling plays, seeing the whole field when most quarterbacks barely saw past the center. At Columbia University, he made national headlines. Not for a national title, but for how he played. He had mechanics, poise, vision, and standing on the sidelines was a man named George Halas. Yes, that George. Halas, founder of the Chicago Bears. Halas knew the future of football wasn't in ground and pound, run-heavy attacks. He believed in the T formation, a system with 3 running backs lined up behind the quarterback in a T shape, allowing for deception, movement, and most importantly, the forward pass. But he needed the right quarterback to pull it off. Someone smart, disciplined, accurate, tough. And Sid Luckman checked every box. So in 1939, the Bears traded up to draft him. And what happened next? A football revolution? With Sid at quarterback? The Bears didn't just run the T formation, they mastered it. They weaponized it. In 1940, the Bears shocked the world, beating Washington in the NFL championship game by a score of 73-0. Yes, you heard that right. 73-0. It's still the most lopsided victory in NFL history. And Sid Luckman? He didn't just run the plays, he called them. Audibled them, read the defense in real time. He made throwing the ball look easy in an era when passing was rare, risky, and mostly used as a last resort. Under Sid's command, the Bears won for NFL championships. 1940, 1941, 1943, and 1946. He wasn't just throwing bombs, he was orchestrating symphonies. In 1943, he threw for 28 touchdowns in a 10-game season. Let that number sink in. In an era when teams barely threw the ball, he was putting up modern stats. That year, he posted a passer rating of 107.5, a mark that wouldn't be broken for decades. Sid didn't have the modern equipment. No gloves, no fancy helmets, no quarterback-friendly rules, but he was efficient, deadly accurate, and absolutely relentless. What made him even more impressive? He did it all while serving his country. During World War II, Sid served as an officer in the U.S. Merchant Marine. He would play NFL games on weekends, then return to his military duties during the week. Talk about commitment. But perhaps Sid's biggest contribution wasn't just on the field. It was in changing how the quarterback position was viewed. He was the first true pocket passer, first guy to make defenses pay with his arm, to control the tempo of the game from the line of scrimmage. Before Sid, quarterbacks were more like runners who occasionally threw. After Sid, the passing game became a core strategy, and the T formation spread like wildfire. Teams from the pros to college to high school adopted it overnight, trying to replicate the success of the Bears and their brilliant signal caller. By the time Sid retired in 1950, he had over 14,000 career passing yards, 137 touchdowns, a career passer rating of 75.0, which ranked among the best of his time, and 4 NFL championships. He was named NFL MVP in 1943, selected to multiple All-Pro teams, and eventually enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1965. But even more than that, Sid Luckman left behind a blueprint. A quarterback with intelligence, leadership, and the arm to back it up. A system that proved strategy could beat brute force. A legacy that still lives on every time a QB drops back to pass. And yet, he's often forgotten in today's highlight reels, buried under modern stats. Overlooked in the GOAT conversations, but true football minds know. Without Sid Luckman, there is no Joe Montana. It's no Tom Brady, no Patrick Mahomes. Because Sid was the one who showed us what a thinking quarterback could do. He brought the T formation to life. He turned passing into a weapon. And he gave birth to the modern quarterback era. So next time you watch a quarterback thread a needle between 2 defenders, or audible into a touchdown at the line, calmly command a 2-minute drill, remember the man who did it first. The man who made it all possible, Sid Luckman, the quarterback who brought the T formation to life and forever changed the face of football. What does it take to become a football legend? A cannon arm, lightning speed, clutch playoff moments? Or maybe, just maybe, it takes doing something so unbelievable, so untouchable, that no one ever repeats it. Meet Ernie Nevers. Not just a football player, a living, breathing one-man army. And in 1929, he did what no player has ever done before or since. Scored 40 points in a single NFL game.
40.
Let's break that down. This wasn't in some scrimmage. This wasn't an exhibition. This was a real, regular season NFL game. Nevers didn't just dominate. He destroyed single-handedly. But who was he? Born in 1891, Ernie Nevers came from Superior, Wisconsin. Raised tough, built tough, natural-born athlete. Football, baseball, track, you name it, he did it, and he excelled. He eventually landed at Stanford University, where he played fullback. And when we say fullback, don't think blocker, think bruiser, think ball carrier. Think entire offense wrapped in one man's frame. Nevers was the engine of Stanford's offense. He could run through you. He could run around you. And he never got tired. Even the legendary coach Pop Warner called him one of the greatest players he'd ever seen. And that's coming from the man who coached Jim Thorpe. After college, Nevers did a stint in pro baseball with the St. Louis Browns. Yes, seriously, he pitched in the majors, before returning to football, where he signed with the Duluth Eskimos in the early NFL days. And back then, football wasn't glamorous. It was brutal. Mud, blood, ice, games played in sub-zero temps. And Nevers, he didn't just play, he thrived. He never missed a game. Often played every single snap, fence, defense, and even special teams. A true Iron Man. But his masterpiece came on November 28, 1929, Thanksgiving Day. The Chicago Cardinals vs. the Chicago Bears. The city rivalry was red hot. Tensions were high. And Nevers, he turned the field into his personal canvas. Final score: Cardinals 40, Bears 6. And guess who scored all 40 points for the Cardinals? That's right, Ernie Nevers. He rushed for 6 touchdowns. Let's pause there. Even today, 6 rushing touchdowns in a game is almost impossible. Only Alvin Kamara has done it since, and even then he didn't score all the points. Nevers didn't just score 6 TDs. He also kicked 4 extra points himself. So that's 6 by 6 equals 36 points, 4 extra points equals 40 total points. No help, no gimmicks. No flukes, just one man, crushing an entire defense. To this day nearly a century later, no player has scored more points in a single NFL game. It's not Jerry Rice, not Emmitt Smith, not LaDainian Tomlinson, not Christian McCaffrey, not even primetime Brady or Mahomes, only Ernie Nevers. And remember, this was before face masks, before high-tech pads, before roughing the passer flags. He was out there with leather helmets, brutal tackles, and barely any protection. And he still delivered a performance for the ages. But Nevers wasn't just a one-game wonder. He was All-NFL multiple times, led the league in scoring, was known for his punishing running style and unbreakable will. He even coached while still playing, serving as player coach for the Cardinals, something almost unimaginable today. And that wasn't all. Ernie Nevers also played defense as a linebacker and safety, made tackles, broke up passes, called plays. A one-man team in every sense, and off the field, humble, quiet, never flashy. A man who let his game do all the talking. He retired in the early 1930s, but his impact never faded. When the Pro Football Hall of Fame was founded in 1963, Nevers was part of the inaugural class. That's right, he was one of the first inducted, alongside Jim Thorpe and Red Grange. Why? Because his game wasn't about stats. It was about dominance, about being unstoppable, about redefining what one man could do on a football field. And nearly a century later, when you scroll through NFL records and see most points in a single game, 40 Ernie Nevers. 29. You're reminded that some records just might never fall. They belong to a different era, a different toughness, a different breed of athlete. So the next time you watch a high-scoring shootout, when a player racks up fantasy points like crazy, remember someone once did it all himself? No quarterback tossing touchdowns, no wideouts hauling in bombs, no kicker finishing the drive, just Ernie Nevers. Running, scoring, kicking, alone. A performance that echoes through time. A record untouched. A legacy that still stands tall. Ernie Nevers. The man who scored 40 points in a single NFL game, and the legend no one's ever been able to catch. What does it take to make a sport matter? A dynasty? A superstar? Or maybe a single electrifying player who captures the imagination of an entire nation? Let me introduce you to Red Grange, the man they called the Galloping Ghost. He wasn't just a football player. He was a phenomenon. The man who put professional football on the map. Before Red Grange, college football ruled America, the NFL. It was small. It was scrappy. It was struggling. But then Grange entered the scene, and everything changed. Born Harold Edward Grange in 1903 in Forksville, Pennsylvania, he didn't grow up with fame. He grew up delivering ice, working hard, building strength the old school way. But by the time he got to the University of Illinois, he wasn't just another student. He was about to become a legend, and it all began on October 18th, 1924. The opponent? Michigan Wolverines, one of the top teams in the nation. The moment. The dedication of Illinois' brand new Memorial Stadium. What did Grange do? He returned the opening kickoff, 95 yards for a touchdown. Then, he scored 3 more touchdowns.
Nice.
In the first 12 minutes, by halftime, he had 4 touchdowns. By the end of the game, 6. Total domination. Sports writers didn't have enough superlatives. They called him the Ghost because he was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. You'd blink and he was gone, running past you, through you, around you. Fans called him the Galloping Ghost, and the name stuck. It became a national celebrity overnight. Newspapers, radio, even movies. No one had ever seen a player like him before. But college football legends come and go, right? Here's where Red Grange changed the game, literally, in 1925. Just days after his final college game, he signed with the Chicago Bears. Yes, pro football. Yes, controversial at the time. Back then, playing professionally was seen as selling out. It wasn't glamorous. It was grimy, it was dangerous, and most players were unknown. But Grange changed all that. When he joined the Bears, they hit the road for the most famous tour in football history. 17 games in 67 days. They played in New York, Boston, Washington, D.C., even Florida. Everywhere they went, stadiums sold out. Tens of thousands packed the stands just to see Red Grange. For the first time ever, the NFL was big time because of one man. Grange didn't just score touchdowns, he sold tickets. He sold the game. Owners took notice, fans took notice. The press followed his every move. The NFL had found its first true superstar. And while the injuries came, the pounding was intense. Grange kept coming back. He played with the Bears until 1934, took time off, then returned from 1935 to 1937. But even as the game evolved, his legacy only grew stronger. He wasn't just the galloping ghost. He was the face of pro football's rise. He proved that skill, speed, and charisma could make football a national obsession. He turned Saturday's college hero into Sunday's professional icon, and that model. That's what every football star has followed since. From Jim Brown to Joe Montana, from Jerry Rice to Patrick Mahomes, they all walk a path paved by Red Grange. And it didn't stop after retirement. Grange became a sports broadcaster, spoke at banquets, inspired generations. He stayed close to the game, never too far from the sideline. When the Pro Football Hall of Fame opened in 1963, guess who was in the inaugural class? Red Grange. And not just for his stats, not just for his speed, but for what he meant. He was the man who brought credibility, style, and excitement to the NFL. He showed the country that football wasn't just a game, which was a spectacle. Without Grange, maybe the NFL never takes off. Maybe it remains in the shadows of college football. Maybe the Super Bowl doesn't even exist. But with Grange, it became a national powerhouse. His speed thrilled. His moves dazzled. His presence transformed the league. Even his nicknames, the Galloping Ghost, carries an air of magic. He was poetry in motion, elegance wrapped in toughness. A blur in cleats, and the numbers? Sure, they're impressive. But Grange's impact was never about stats. It was about turning doubters into believers, turning empty bleachers into sold-out crowds, turning a small-time league into a nationwide phenomenon. So when you watch the NFL today, with billion-dollar stadiums, Super Bowl commercials, and primetime stars, remember the man who made it matter, Red Grange. The galloping ghost, the icon who showed America what professional football could become. He wasn't just ahead of his time, he defined his time. And he changed the game forever. Before the NFL was all about bombs downfield and quick strike offenses, before quarterbacks were kings and spread formations ruled the gridiron, there was Sid Luckman, a quarterback unlike any before him. A man who took football from the Medan muscle era to something more elegant, more dangerous, more revolutionary. This is the story of Sid Luckman, the T-formation quarterback who transformed the NFL passing game forever. Let's rewind to the 1930s and 40s. At the time, football was still stuck in the past. Offenses were predictable. Running plays dominated. Passing, that was a last resort. Quarterbacks mostly handed off or punted. The game was a war of inches, not a game of air raids. Then came a kid from Brooklyn, New York. Born in 1916 to a working-class Jewish family, his name, Sidney Luckman. He lit it up at Columbia University, playing in a single-wing offense. But even there, people knew this guy had a special arm. But it wasn't until he joined the Chicago Bears in 1939 that everything would change, not just for him, but for the entire sport. You see, Bears head coach George Halas had a plan. He wanted to revive a formation most teams had left behind, the T formation. It lined up three backs behind the quarterback. It allowed more deception, more motion, and most importantly, a real passing threat. But to run it right, Halas needed someone special. Someone smart, someone accurate, someone fearless. That someone was Sid Luckman. Halas personally recruited him, taught him the ins and outs of the T. And when Sid took the field, everything clicked. Suddenly, the Bears weren't grinding out wins. They were exploding down the field. In 1940, it all came together. The Bears reached the NFL championship game. Their opponent, the powerhouse Washington Redskins. And what happened next became NFL folklore. The Bears destroyed Washington 73-0. Yes, 73-0. The most lopsided game in NFL history. Luckman didn't just manage the offense, he orchestrated a masterpiece. He threw, he faked it. The T formation confused everyone. Defenders were lost. Coaches were stunned. And the league was about to be forever changed. From that point forward, the T formation was the future. And Luckman was its face. He went on to win 4 NFL championships with the Bears. 1940, 1941, 1943, and 1946. During his career, he threw for over 14,000 yards and an incredible 137 touchdowns. In an era when passing was still considered risky business, in 1943, he threw for 28 touchdowns in just 10 games. That would be impressive today. Back then, it was unthinkable. He even threw 7 touchdowns in a single game, a record that stood for decades. Here's the truth. Luckman's greatness wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the style, the vision, the leadership. He made the quarterback more than just a ball handler, turned it into the most important position in sports. He read defenses, changed plays at the line, mastered timing routes. He was doing things in the 1940s that most QBs wouldn't learn for another 30 years. And let's not forget, Luckman did it all in an era of brutality. No face masks, no quarterback protections, no dome stadiums. Just mud, leather helmets, and raw toughness. He was as smart as he was tough, a field general in the truest sense. And off the field, he was humble, grounded, a team-first guy who deflected praise and gave credit to his coaches and teammates. But football insiders knew, without Sid Luckman, there is no modern quarterback. No Joe Montana, no Tom Brady, no Patrick Mahomes. Every pocket passer owes something to the path Sid paved. And when he retired in 1950, he didn't just walk away. He became a mentor, a teacher, helping young QBs understand the T formation and what it meant to own a huddle. In 1965, he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. A no-brainer. But his impact can't be measured by a plaque in Canton. His legacy lives in every slant route, every play-action fake, every quarterback audibling at the line. Sid Luckman took a game that was ground and pound and made it strategic and explosive. He brought precision to chaos, planning to violence, art to the gridiron. So next time you see a quarterback drop back, scan the field, thread the needle into a tight window. Remember who made that possible. Not just a coach, not just a formation, but a man. A man named Sid Luckman, the T-formation quarterback who revolutionized the passing game. And there you have it, the forgotten warriors of the NFL. Men who played for pride, not contracts. Men who redefined toughness before sports science, endorsements, or instant replays. Jim Thorpe, who gave everything and got little back. Sammy Baugh, who rewrote the quarterback position. Grange, who made fans believe in pro football. And Fritz Pollard, who broke barriers that took generations to rebuild. Their stories don't end with a trophy or a viral highlight. They end in quiet. In hospitals, small towns, or simply lost to time. But not tonight. Tonight we remember. If this story moved you, like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. And if you want more cozy bedtime stories, NFL throwbacks, or just a peaceful night-s, rest with a dose of real history. You know where to find us. Sleep well, football fan. 'Cause legends never die. They just need someone to tell their story.